Okay, so before we start, I do want to just give a quick spoiler warning. So if you've seen my reviews in the past, you'll know that I try to really skirt around major spoilers, at least for lots of my review, just so you can watch the review without having seen the material and without me just explicitly spoiling it. I'm not going to do that in this case. I am going to be talking about spoilers from the gate. And the reason is, I already have a feeling this video is going to be pretty long. I mean, this is a very long book, and there's a lot to get through. And so, anticipating that this video is going to be very long, I don't want to make it longer by having a spoiler free and a spoiler section. So, I'm just going to tell you right off of the gate, this video is going to contain spoilers, but only for the book. Just this book, Fellowship of the Ring. And probably The Hobbit, because I read The Hobbit before reading this. But there's not going to be any spoilers for the other two books, because I haven't read them. I've never read them. And there's not going to be any spoilers for the movies, because I haven't seen them either. And I do plan on making videos on all of those. I'm just, when I get to them. But, so, this review is only going to talk about this book. And I would like, if you want to leave a comment talking about it or anything, that's totally, I love to talk about it more. But please just refrain to sticking to this book, not the movie, because I know from talking about the movies, they change stuff. So I don't know what's a spoiler and what's not from the movies. And I'm not kidding. This is my first time reading the series. So I would like to... finish it spoiler free. So, with that out of the way, enjoy the video. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky. 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone. 9 for mortal men doomed to die. 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Where to start? I honestly have no idea. First things first is I should make a correction to something I just said. This is not my first time reading Lord of the Rings. This will be my first time finishing Lord of the Rings. So I've tried to read the series in the past, and it just hasn't happened. The furthest I've got is I got like a chapter into the Two Towers, but it's just a tough read. It's not easy to read, and so younger me just really had trouble with it and wasn't able to complete it. So with that, it was sort of an interesting read going back through this, because there was some stuff that I remembered happening, and I was like, oh yeah, like I remember that's happening, or I remember this was going to happen. The biggest thing for me was you shall not pass, which I found interesting, by the way, that Gandalf actually does not say that. They actually slightly changed the line for the movie. Let me see, but it was close to that. But like it wasn't exactly "you shall not pass." Let me see if I can find it. You cannot pass. That's what it was. Yes. You cannot pass, he said. The orc stood still and a dead silence fell. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you, flame of Udin. Go back to the shadow. You cannot pass. So, I just found that interesting. But anyway, so this was a bit of an interesting experience. And, I mean, I have to say, this book is fantastic. Like, there's nothing else really to say. It's so good. But it's tough, right? Like, that would be, I've done negatives first before. So I guess I'm doing the negatives first now. This book isn't exactly an easy read, and that it both plays into the pros and the cons of the story, really, because it is a double-edged sword. Um, on one hand, the world building is amazing. Like seriously, it's really incredible to think about that Tolkien, when he was writing this book, not so much The Hobbit, but you can tell when he was writing this book, he sort of had I don't want to say a plan, but like it really felt like he had the whole history of Middle Earth mapped out in his head when he was writing it, and you can hear it just in references. They make sort of passing references to history, and from talking about with my dad has loved these, and so just talking about it with him and talking about some of the lore, like there's snippets in here, like in chapter. I don't know what chapter it is. Whatever. In A Knife in the Dark, what chapter is that? Chapter 11. There's a bit of a mention of the old history and some stuff about like the Cimarrols and that big fight. And talking with my dad about it, I was like, a little bit, and it's like that's from the Similarian. I hope I said that right. Sort of like that's from. They mentioned what happens in that book in here, which is really crazy to think about. There's other things like not I'll say Galadriel, not her, Gil-galad, right? Like the final stand of Gil-galad, the March of Gil-galad. Like there's so much Middle Earth history pumped into here. It's crazy and it's amazing, but it can also be a bit of a detriment to the book in that if you don't want to get that, right? Like if you don't want all the history and you just want a little story about, Frodo going to destroy the ring, this book is not for you. It's not, because you have to be all in. It sort of feels like you have to be all in on that because, there's so much of the book that you will just skim through. Like, if you're just looking for a bit more lighthearted adventure, if you're not looking to absorb every detail, like 90% of this book is just going to be filler. Which just makes it really tough to read. And that's also why I had so much trouble reading this series in the past. It was, I've done The Hobbit multiple times, but with this, it's just because it's all that jam-packed, and because at the time I wasn't looking for all that, I was just looking for a cool fantasy adventure, it really got in the way of that. And I guess that's what the movies, you could argue that's what the movies are for, although I'm told the movies did not do justice to these at all, but I'm not really going to, I can't really comment that on myself until I finish the books and then watch the movies. So, but that's really probably the biggest negative. But at the same time, it's also a positive, because another thing about that writing style is it really paints a picture. It really does. It paints quite a picture. And so the one thing about it painting a picture, the thing about this really descriptive writing style is, like I was saying, it really paints a picture, but you sort of get these images of these set pieces in your mind, and it's really, really, really quite cool. Especially when you can correct the movies on being wrong. And, because when your picture that, the book so elegantly describes does not match what you see on screen at all, it's kind of disappointing. And obviously I haven't seen the movies yet, but this happened to me with The Hobbit, actually. And so, this is the best example for me is Gollum, that lake, that whole scene in the book was really, really cool. And the way the lake was portrayed, totally different from the movie. Because after I watched that scene, read that scene in the book, I, had seen the movies in the past. I haven't watched them in full in quite a long time. But, and I don't really plan on doing it, frankly. It's a short book. You don't need to make it as long as you did. Peter Jackson. But anyway, so then I was like, at the time when I had saw the movies, I read the book, and I remember sort of feeling like I thought this scene was done well, this scene with Gollum. And then so I went back and I watched that from the movie, and I was like, this is wrong. Like, this is just all wrong. And I don't mean like the dialogue. I mean, the dialogue was okay, and I don't mean the actual setup of how everything happened, because that was wrong too. It wasn't a game. So, for Gollum, like, it kind of started out as a game, but then he got impatient very quickly because he was hungry. I don't even mean that. I mean the set piece, the designing, the lighting. It was wrong, and the fact that I can just explicitly tell you that was wrong, just goes to show you the level of detail put into these, and like, so like with that lake, first off, it's, I had this problem actually when I watched the video of Bilbo confronting Smaug, in that, later on, and I think it was the second movie, whatever, that scene, it takes place under a mountain with absolutely no light, right? Like, there's no natural light source. It takes place like in the heart of a mountain, so there's no natural light getting in. And there's no torches because the place has been abandoned, and the dragon has absolutely, no, I guess, problem with light. Like, it has a strong enough reflexes that it could tell when Bilbo just came in and stole a goblet, right? Like, so like, it doesn't need the light. And so how is it this bright? Like seriously, how is it this bright? This place should be almost dark. When Bilbo enters, Smaug knows he enters because of smell. In the book, I mean, in smell. It's not a sight thing. Smaug smells the thief back, and that's when they have their conversation. It's not really a sight thing. Smaug wouldn't be able to see him anyway because it's so incredibly dark. So how is it this light in the movie? And Gollum's lake actually has like the same sort of problem, right? It's in the middle of a mountain, right? Like, Bilbo escaping follows Gollum. It says for like a decent amount, like at least like 5-10 minutes. I was just like walking, following Gollum. Like, that's how he gets out. So it's in the middle of a mountain. There's no exit in sight. It's just in the middle of a mountain, and there's really no natural light source. So how is it this bright? But not to mention, the darkness in the book gives it an eerie, sort of feeling, right? Like, the water is really dark and really cold, and it sort of gives this ominous feeling that there might be some really scary fish or creature at the bottom of the water, and you really do not want to go diving in there because it's this really dark, spooky lake. And like, the only thing Bilbo has for light are his sword, which glows when orcs are around, and Gollum's piercing eyes, right? Like, that's it. So where does all this light come from? Light? I don't know. But like, that trend continues here, and there's some really great, scenes, I guess, in here. So like, this is, I'm just going to read a passage from the book. I'll probably do this multiple other times. But like, just to get an idea, so this is the Ring Wraith, right? So this is Frodo, Sam, Pippin, or it's either Merry or Pippin, I don't remember. It's Pippin, I can see. They're traveling to what is going to be Frodo's new house, that he's going to pretend to stay and then leave, right? And then the Ring Wraith is on his trail, so let's see. The other two ran quickly to the left and down into a little hollow not far from the road. There they lay flat. Frodo hesitated for a second. Curiosity or some other feeling was struggling with his desire to hide. The sound of hoofs drew nearer. Just in time, he threw himself down in a patch of long grass behind a tree that overshadowed the road. Then he lifted his head and peered cautiously above one of the great roots. Round the corner came a black horse. No hobbit pony, but a full-sized horse. and on it sat a large man who seemed to crouch in the saddle, wrapped in a great black cloak and hood, and so that only his boots in the high stirrups showed below. His face was shadowed and invisible. When it reached the tree and was level with Frodo, the horse stopped. The riding figure sat quite still with its head bowed as if listening. From inside the hood came a noise as if someone sniffing to catch an elusive scent. The head turned from side to side of the road. A sudden unreasoning fear of discovery laid hold of Frodo, and he thought of his ring. He hardly dared to breathe, and yet the desire to get it out of his pocket became so strong that he began slowly to move his hand. He felt that he had only to slip it on, and then he would be safe. The advice of Gandalf seemed absurd. Bilbo had used the ring, and I am still in the Shire, he thought, as his hand touched the chain on which it hung. At that moment the rider sat up and shook the reins. The horse stepped forward, walking slowly at first, and then breaking into a quick trot. That scene, as creepy and as eerie as it is, I'll try to put the words on screen because I'm a visual learner, person. So I'll try to put the words on there, but that's creepy. It's creepy, but can you not just picture that in your mind? Can you not picture all of that in your mind, after reading that? And that's what I mean, this book, that's not just a one-time occurrence. This book does it a lot, and I'll try to find, a couple more examples for anybody who hasn't read this or in a long time or only watched the movies. So I got a couple more passages just to read, just to demonstrate by example. So this is when they first entered, the old forest. They picked away among the trees, and their ponies plodded along, carefully avoiding the many writhing and interlacing roots. There was no undergrowth. The ground was rising steadily, and as they went forward, it seemed that the trees became taller, darker, and thicker. There was no sound except an occasional drip of moisture falling through the still leaves. For the moment, there was no whispering or movement among the branches, but they all got an uncomfortable feeling that they were being watched with disapproval, deepening to dislike and even enmity. The feeling steadily grew until they found themselves looking up quickly or glancing back over their shoulders as if they expected a sudden blow. Yeah, so there's that, and let's see. Yeah, okay, so this is they're in Moria now, and this is when they get, after being so cramped, and they get to a bigger hall. So they had marched as far as the hobbits could endure without a rest, and all were thinking of a place where they could sleep, when suddenly the walls to right and left vanished. They seemed to have passed through some arched doorway into a black and empty space. There was a great draught of warmer air behind them, and before them the darkness was cold on their faces. They halted and crowded anxiously together. Gandalf seemed pleased. "I chose the right way," he said. "At least we are coming to the habitable parts, and I guess that we are not far now from the eastern side. But we are high up, a good deal higher than the Dimrol Gate, unless I am mistaken. From the feeling of the air, we must be in a wide hall. I will now risk a little light." He raised his staff, and for a brief instant there was blaze like a flash of lightning. Great shadows sprang up and fled, and for a second they saw a vast roof far above their heads, upheld by many mighty pillars hewn of stone. Before them and on either side stretched a huge empty hall, its black walls polished and smooth as glass, flashed and glittered. 3 other entrances they saw, dark black arches, one straight before them eastwards, and one on either side. Then the light went out. So, they're just passages. Let me see, I want to see if I can find another one about Rivendell. Let me put a positive one in there. But, well, I don't know, because he kind of gets knocked out and then dragged to Rivendell. The Hobbit is really the better one for Rivendell. But either way, can't you just picture that in your head? At least I can when reading that. Like I get a super clear image of those quotes in my head, and that sort of like the genius of this part of the genius is you can just picture everything. You know, all these great scenes you can just picture in your head, and it's great. So that's also not something I've seen a lot of books do. At least do as well as Tolkien. I mean, books have made me picture scenes and everything before, but you know, often the appeal of movies, of getting a movie version of something, is to sort of see it, right? Like to really properly see it. You know, you sort of get some of an image of the book, you know, in your mind when you're reading, but to actually properly see it and to see it all moving on the screen in front of you, that's really the appeal of movie adaptations, right? I mean, obviously I know it's famous, you know, there's going to be movie adaptations, but this really doesn't need it. Like really, and actually it's something I want to talk about is this sort of feels impossible to make into a good movie. But that's something I'm going to talk about later. But, you know, I think it's probably something I'll save for the end, but like, you know, in terms of, you know, you want things to be really good and you want to have this solid, clear picture that you don't really get in the books, well, read this. Because you get that solid, clear picture. You get that solid, clear picture so much you can critique very minor set details, you know, when you go and watch the real thing. And so, or movie adaptations, I guess. But like, it's incredible, and it's not something I've seen. I haven't seen personally other book series do quite as well, and it's really amazing. And again, that sort of contributes to the bad part in that makes it harder to read, but it makes for an amazing experience. And so definitely, just even if you want to picture these giant set pieces in your head, I would recommend reading this. I really just spent 20 minutes just talking about, you know, the imaging and everything like that. Am I actually going to talk about the content? You may be wondering. Am I actually going to talk about the content of this book now? And, well, it'll be your lucky day, because I am going to talk about the content right now. So, I mean, I don't know where to start. It is kind of tough how to pick a place to start, just because it's so long. So just for reference, I mean, maybe it changes, you know, based off the version, but so for this version I'm reading, this has 398 pages, and that may not seem like a lot, but look at the text size. Like, that's, I don't know if it comes across, that comes across, but it's a lot. You know, that's a small text size. Actually, let me see if I can grab something else for reference. So this is Dune. This is another book really that I wish I started doing these reviews earlier, because I read Dune before doing Lord of the Rings, and so I guess this is the movie review because I haven't seen that yet, which I really should. But it's kind of tough to do a book review now. But I'm going to want to do a book review on the sequel. So you see the weird position I'm in. But anyway, so this is Dune, and it itself doesn't even have like the biggest text size. But I mean, you can see that it's bigger. And bigger by a significant margin too. So yeah, this is all to say this book is very, very jam-packed. There is a lot. Let me just grab it. There's a lot to get through. And so there's a lot of story in here. Which is also, I guess, okay, I'll talk about it now. I said I was going to talk about it later. I lied. I don't understand how you can make a good movie of this. Like of this. Just this whole thing. Like I said, it's 400 pages of jam-packed. If you make this text size bigger, and you make the line spacing bigger, you will easily get double that. Like, seriously, like, you could easily get to 1,000 pages of this. You know, if you just do a little reformatting, and I'm really not kidding. How do you jam pack that all into like 2.5 hours? I really don't know. But you know what sort of I don't understand why they didn't do. You know, and so I sort of feel like, anyway, I feel like this would be better as a TV show, because like, look at, so I just reviewed The Mandalorian, and obviously The Mandalorian had different episode, you know, lengths, but so The Mandalorian, you know, just to do some quick math, let's say the average episode of a Mandalorian episode is 45 minutes, because most of them are between 30 minutes and an hour. So that's, you know, let me just get my phone real quick just to do some quick maths, but 45 times 8, you know, again, this is approximation, rough math. 45 times 8, that's 360 minutes, you know, so you divide that by 6, you get hours. That's 6 hours, right? You know, so like one season of like a regular TV show is 6 hours of content. And even still, you would probably still, even with 6 hours, you would still probably have to cut things and change things for the sake of time. But I think with 6 hours, you could properly do it. I don't think you can do it with 2.5 hours. But what really annoys me about this whole thing is, guess what? The book itself divides itself, right? Literally, this is book 2, right? It splits itself in half. So here's book 1, book 2. Like the book splits itself in half. You know, it's not like you yourself have to create a stopping point. You know, it's not like you as a movie director, you know, have to go in and say, okay, I think this is a good spot where we can stop and make part 1. The book literally does that for you. It's the freest thing to just go and make it 2 parts, you know, so you can properly expand on everything, and you don't have to have severe cuts. But nope, 2.5 hours, all of this, 2.5 hours, probably over 3 hours. Let's actually see. Let's see the runtime. Fellowship of the Ring runtime. Okay, so it's 3 hours. 3 hours. All of this, 3 hours. It's just not possible, right? And like I said, you know, if you do an 8 episode 45 minutes, you get double that, right? Like if you do 8 hours in out 8 episodes an hour, that's 8 hours. I don't know why they're struggling to do that mental math, but like, I just don't understand. I understand that like those kind of 8 episode streaming series wasn't done at the time that Fellowship of the Ring, you know, like these movies were made, but two-parter movies could have been. I mean, it wasn't that long after these, right? Because these are early 2000s. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 2001. You know, it wasn't that long after these that Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows would do the same thing, and then Hunger Games would do the same thing. Like, Lord of the Rings could easily break this into 2, but no. It just makes no sense to me. I don't understand how you can fit all this. I think I made my point clear by now, but yeah. So let's actually talk about the plot and the characters. I mean, again, there's a lot. Oh, also, I guess I should have mentioned in the previous section, if you've only seen the movies or you don't remember where the book ends, you know, like where it stops, book 1 ends right as Frodo gets to Rivendell. So literally the climax of that book, you know, book inside the book, is Frodo's getting chased by the ring wraiths. You know, he falls in the river, and he sort of is hazy because he's almost knocked out, sees the horses, like the water swallowed him up. But you don't see it properly because he's like almost unconscious because he's like almost dying. And that's how it ends. Like, that's a perfectly good ending to a movie. Like, that's a great ending for a movie, you could say. And then it properly explains everything. Like, if you want to push it back a little bit, you could have all the explanation, some of the explanation stuff in the end of that movie. But I think that's a pretty good way you could end a movie. Anyway, so the plot. What did I think of the plot? I mean, it was very good. Again, it's kind of overwhelming to talk about where to start. So you know what? I'm not going to start with the plot. I'm going to start with the characters. Because I really liked a lot of the characters in this book. Frodo, oh, poor Frodo. Also, I should say this, by the way. So there may be more editing comments on here. I've seen some of these characters, what they look like in the movies. It's kind of hard to avoid seeing what Gandalf looks like. And I've seen a little Frodo. But a lot of these characters, I don't know what they look like in the movies. And I'm kind of only going based off of the books. So if I make comments in the editing text, about like, wow, this guy looks different than expected, and you're wondering why I didn't make them in recording, it's because I haven't seen it yet, because I haven't done the editing yet, because I'm waiting to finish the recording before I look at the images of the characters. And the only reason I'm looking at the images of the characters is so you guys have an idea of what I'm talking about. So, it's also easier for me doing chapters, by the way, but like that's not the initial intention, but it's a side effect. But anyway, I just wanted to make that clear, because there might be a bunch of post-editing comments. But man, Frodo, I feel really bad for Frodo, because it sort of has this huge responsibility forced on him, and I mean, he isn't forced on him; he chooses to take it. But what's so sad about it is he sort of knows, right? Like, Frodo really gets the idea that he's not going to live to see the end of the series. And I think if you had asked him in the beginning of the book, he didn't think he was going to live to see the end of this book. Right? Like, he didn't think he would live to see these events. Live to see the events of the first book. And, like, that's just sad, but it's also so incredibly brave. Frodo's definitely a Gryffindor, because I don't know if I'm gonna sort every character, but he's definitely a Gryffindor, because he's willing to walk into this darkness, and he's willing to take on that quest, knowing, because it's the right thing to do, and knowing that he's probably going to die. Chances are he's just going to die. This is going to be it. This is going to be his life. It's going to end right here. But he knows that someone has to do it, and that for better or for worse, that burn has been put on him. And I think it's also that, well, actually, I know that's also that from the ending, that he doesn't want to put that burn on others, because while he doesn't want to have it himself, he feels like it's worse if other people have it, because he doesn't want someone else he cares about getting hurt. So, it's just really tragic, and I really admire him, and I really admire that bravery, because it's not something that I personally know. Like, if I was in that situation, would I have that same bravery? I really don't know. And it's also sad, because he sort of pushes everyone else away because he doesn't want them to get hurt, even though they care about him. And so, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, I can relate to Frodo a bit, because I've done that. But, yeah, and Sam. Oh, Sam. I can't get enough of Sam. He's great. And he's sort of everything Frodo needs, right? Like, at the end, where Frodo's planning on leaving everybody, Sam says, like, going with you. Like, I don't care. You know, he sort of stands by Frodo the whole way, knowing what the consequences are, knowing that he's probably going to die also. He wants to make sure that his friend is not going to do anything alone, and it is going to have moral support, even if it means the death of him. And so, I admire Sam so much, and I hope the pony, I forget what his name was, the pony that was abused, that then Sam gets to like a bunch, I hope that pony's doing okay. I hope it's not in canon that he dies or something. That would be sad. But, pony got from Bill Ferny, you know, by Butterbeer. Not Butterbeer. That's Harry Potter again. I'm sorry. I'm a Harry Potter kid. I'm a Potterhead. Whatever. By Bree. At Bree. You know, from Bill Ferny. There we go. But now I'm gonna get annoyed that I don't know what the guy's name was. Was it Butterbeer? Butterbeer. See, I was close. Gandalf is an interesting one. Also, he's an interesting character just because, I mean, well, he's Gandalf, but I more so mean, like, I wonder what they're going to do with him. I wonder what they're going to do with Gandalf. Well, let me put it this way. Gandalf is such an important character for this series. You know, he's such a big part of The Hobbit, such a big part of Lord of the Rings. I don't know how he stays dead, right? Like, it sort of feels like it's one of those things where, like, I don't know if Gandalf's dead. Like, Gandalf's out of the story. So after he falls down the pit, he's out of the story completely. Well, for this book. And it's sort of everyone assumes Gandalf's dead. And it's not like that's a bad assumption, right? Like, unless Gandalf has some powers we really just do not know about, he fell into a pit. He fell into a pit that had, I guess it has a bottom. It's not that he had no bottom. He fell into a pit that we didn't see the bottom of. So he should have fallen for a little bit and then gone splat. But also, it's Gandalf. Right? Like, you know, it's a weird situation because I don't see how he can escape that situation. You know, because he fell and we saw him fall. Even though we didn't see his dead body, we saw him fall. You know, it's not like something where he didn't fall. Like, they saw him fall into the pit. So he fell. But he's Gandalf, so how can he be dead? So I don't know what they're going to do with him. I don't know if they're going to bring him back. But Gandalf is cool. Gandalf also gets some of the best quotes. That, you know, and that's something I want to finish the characters before I talk about that. But, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with Gandalf. Aragorn. I hope I'm pronouncing that. Aragorn. Whatever. Aragorn. Aragorn. Again, I haven't seen the movies, so I don't know if that's a correct pronunciation or not. I'm kind of just guessing. But I think that's right. He's a really cool character too, and I am very intrigued on what they are going to do with him, or what happens to him. Well, I guess what he chooses to do in the Two Towers, and we will see. But you know, because he sort of has that dilemma where he wants to go to Gondor and, you know, fight in the war there, but he also doesn't want to abandon Frodo. So he was kind of in that weird in-between state where he doesn't know what to do. But now that Frodo left them, you know, it'd be interesting because that could sort of give him an excuse to go to Gondor and be like, well, I was already, you know, I wanted to stand by Frodo, but Frodo left, so I can go to Gondor, then guilt-free. Or it means he could follow Frodo more, you know, be more like, I can't let him go alone, I have to go after him. And so, I'm curious to see, but I really like Aragorn, and it sort of has like trouble past and everything. He's the heir of Isildur, and everyone rightfully blames Isildur for not getting rid of the ring, although I guess rightfully is weird because it was the ring who had control of him, from the very, very start. So first and foremost, I'd like to, I guess, apologize, but so this is the next day after I recorded the first part. I had just been sitting in front of the computer for basically like an hour at that point, and just something came up, and I thought about recording that night, but I just was too tired to. So it's the next day, and we're back. This may get split up again because I don't have all the time in the world to be recording this too, so it depends on how long I ramble for. But if it sounds a little disjointed and I repeat some stuff, that's why, because I'm, I remember what I was talking about last, but like, there may be some overlap. Is basically what I'm trying to say. It's also why I'm wearing a different shirt. Alright, so Aragorn, I don't know why I'm holding out the book, but Aragorn, yeah, obviously you have that legacy that I do feel bad for. That was the last thing I was talking about. But it's sort of like his knowledge. I find his knowledge of Middle-earth amazing. I know he sort of grew up as Gondor. He's, the ancestor of a king, so I guess that makes it his job to learn a lot, but like, still, I find it amazing just how much knowledge he has as someone who didn't live through all of it, and it's sort of, the book describes as like a lot of stuff like falls into legend and, gets forgotten, which that's what the elves fear, in Lorien, but Aragorn remembers it all, and so I don't know. I really liked Aragorn, and interesting to see what happens to him in the next book, as I'm fairly certain I already talked about. Also, I know too, I didn't touch on Gimli and Legolas. Gimli and Legolas, I really liked what they did with them in the second half, because again, this is something that goes with all the world building, is even though it's not really said a lot, it's said a bit in Lorien, but you get it beforehand, and I'm pretty sure it's said in The Hobbit. But from before Lorien, right? Like if you're just reading this and you get to the Council of Elrond and everything, like I don't think you really say that the elves and dwarves don't like each other, but you really get that the elves and dwarves like each other. I don't think it's even explicitly said why the elves and dwarves don't like each other, but my impression was the elves, they view the dwarves as greedy, because they value their jewels, and so they sort of view them as greedy, and the dwarves also like a good battle story, and they sort of have they have a sort of honor in that comes with fighting in battle, and I think the elves don't like that either, because even though they're good at combat, like they clearly don't like it, and they've seen enough combat that they don't think it's something that should be worshipped. And the dwarves don't like the elves because they sort of feel like that the elves' immortality makes them pretentious, that they sort of look down on those who are not the elves, and sort of everything like that, including the dwarves, and like basically the stuff I just said. But and the reality is, there's a bit of truth to both of that, right? Dwarves, it's true, dwarves like their combat stories, and dwarves like their gold, and elves don't like that thing, and they do sort of look down on, I don't want to say look down, I don't know how much they look down on these other creatures, just as much like, I guess they kind of do. I was going to say, like, their lives just feel so tiny compared to theirs. right? Like there's a line. So this is Legolas when they're in Anduin. For the elves, the world moves, and it moves both very swift and very slow. Swift because they themselves change little and all else fleets by. It is a grief to them. Slow because they do not count the running years, not for themselves. The passing seasons are but ripples, ever repeated in the long, long stream. Yet beneath the sun, all things must wear to an end at last. And I sort of think that quote sort of explains why the elves... I don't know. I think some of them view the others as less, but I think some of them just... You know, when you live forever, the lives of the humans just feel tiny and insignificant. And I think that's part of it too. It's like they don't want to associate with these people because they know that unlike, other elves, these people are just going to die. And that's not exactly a fun thing to experience, is to experience everyone around you dying while you are still living. So I definitely think that's part of it. What I really like about the story is, or at least the second half, because this doesn't apply until the second book, which could have been its own movie. I'm not going down that tangent again. Is that Gimli and Legolas, right? So, Gimli is a dwarf, and he's the son of one of the 12 dwarves from The Hobbit. I think he's Gloin's son. I don't remember, but which one? But he's the son of one of the dwarves from The Hobbit. And Legolas is the son of the Elven king that kidnaps, or keeps the party in The Hobbit hostage in Mirkwood. So they're right, like, so like that in itself means they should not like each other, because they had a bad relationship in Hobbit. And this is actually a layer I didn't even think about when reading this, but it's something I'm thinking about now. So so Legolas's father imprisoned the dwarves for trespassing. And the dwarves didn't want to give up the reason for their quest, because they knew they figured the Elven King would be like, hey, when the Elven King would want a piece of the pie when it comes to the gold they were trying to get back from Smog, and so it was not a good situation. The elves wouldn't let the dwarves go until they wanted information, and the dwarves would have stayed there until they died. So it took Bilbo, slipping the ring on and helping them escape to get out. So they're obviously not on good terms, and combine that with elves and dwarves not liking each other, and you sort of have a recipe for disaster. But these two people that they're now forced to spend so much time together, right? Because they spend so much time traveling, right? So like I don't remember exactly when they leave in the beginning, but it's like December or January. Like it's like, I think it's December. It's like midwinter, and then the book ends by the time this book ends, it's like spring. That's also something else that's really cool, by the way, is the continuity of like the months, right? So like they leave in September, on Frodo's birthday. And then they get to Rivendell in like October. They get to Rivendell in like October, so like a month and a half. And then they stay in Rivendell for a while, until like December, and then, and then they're traveling for a while, and then they wind up in Lorien, I think in like February, maybe March. No, it must be February, because then they spend another month in there, and then they're described as like spring being almost over, like a week or two after that, winter being almost over for like, so that's a cool continuity. But anyway, so, if you assume they left in December, and let's say that this book ends in March, that means they spent January, February, 3 months together. Maybe more, you know, so whatever, 3 to 4 months together. And so they sort of come to realize that, like, it's, how do I put it? They sort of come to realize that these stereotypes and these reasons they have for hating each other, like, aren't really true. Like, you know, like, Gimli's told that elves suck, but here's an elf, you know, right here that doesn't suck. And Legolas, you know, basically experiences the same thing. They sort of, by forcing each other to spend so much time together, they sort of break down those barriers, and they break down, you know, their walls of prejudice against another, and they actually learn, like, hey, this person that I'm told is bad is actually not bad. You know, it's actually, but not only are they not bad, they're actually a pretty cool person. And so I really like, you know, what's so cool about that is, like, none of this is, like, mentioned. Like, this is all some stuff that subtly happens in the background, right? Like, Tolkien never really goes, I mean, he does say it in Anduin, right? Because when they're in Anduin and they're sitting together, that's when he sort of mentions, like Gimli and Legolas have become good friends, but, like, if you've been paying attention, you know, right, like, you know, like, that should not be news to anybody who has been reading and paying attention to what's going on, because that's been made pretty clear, and that's all been, like, going in the background. It's just been a lot of subtle things, and I think that's really, really cool to see, to sort of have these subtle and long changes throughout, you know, these 3 months. And so I really liked that. I really liked that story arc. And again, I'm curious what's gonna happen. I don't know. See, the thing about the ending is, I mean, I guess it's also kind of a negative, it's kind of a positive. So I talked about this in my Mandalorian season season 3 video, so I don't know how much I'm going to go into it again, but I like series that have endings. Okay, so that what I just said, I mean, that's a bit misleading. I like books whose each entry in the series has an ending. It has a satisfying ending, and the example I brought up in that video is Harry Potter. Right? Like, each Harry Potter book, even though it's part of a 7-book series, you know, it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And even though they're part of that larger story, the beginning, middle, and end, it still feels satisfying, and it still feels like it's one cohesive story, and it still feels like the story of that book, like even though the story of the series isn't done, it feels like the story of that book wrapped up well and did a good job, and, you know, was conclusive. If I were to rank one bad thing about this book, it's that it has a cliffhanger ending, and I'm not a fan of cliffhanger endings. I mean, this ending was great. You know, it's sort of a weird situation, because this book, it's very clearly, like, you know, like I was saying, like, with Harry Potter, each Harry Potter book is standalone, right? Like, it's standalone, but it exists in the larger world, if that makes sense. Like, you can read one of the Harry Potter books, and you probably shouldn't do this if you haven't read any of the other Harry Potter books, because you'd be missing context, but, like, you could pick up, like, Harry Potter book 6, right? You could pick up Harry Potter Half-Blood Prince and read it, and feel satisfied. That has a good beginning, middle, and end, right? You know, like, you know, if you don't want to reread all the other books, and you just want to read Harry Potter Half-Blood Prince, you can read that, and it has a good beginning, middle, and end. This book, it does not have that. You know, this book is clearly, the way it ends, it's part 1 of 3, right? Like, this is a to be continued ending. Like, this is a cliffhanger ending. And I guess there's nothing inherently wrong with cliffhanger endings, depending on how long you have to wait, personally. I would have been really annoyed, like if I had to wait 2 years, right? So like obviously all the books are out now. I can just pick up the Two Towers, start it, and sort of see how the cliffhanger addresses itself, how it fixes itself. But if I'll be really annoyed if when this book came out, I don't know when it came out exactly. I'm trying to see. Copyright 1954. Okay. 1940, yeah. So, like, if I was alive in 1954, and I read this book, and the Two Towers, let's just say, I don't know when it came out. Actually, let's see when it came out. So, let me just double check that date is correct. Fellowship of the Ring book release date. Yep, July 29th, 1954. The Two Towers book release date. Oh, they're actually very close together. So, the Fellowship came out in July 1954. The Two Towers came out in November 1954. So, that's good. And I'm just curious, when did Return of the King come out? Return of the King book release date. That one took a bit, actually. So, the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers were a couple months apart, right? So that's not a huge wait. Return of the King is almost a year. It's 11 months. So, it comes out. Return of the King comes out October 1955. But so that's not a huge wait. But like, I would have been annoyed, with this if I was in 1955 and I was basically like, well, whatever. If I have to wait a long time after finishing this book, that's the one thing I don't like about cliffhangers, is that you have to wait for them to be resolved, right? Like I said, right now I could pick up the Two Towers and figure out how this cliffhanger ended. But if I, was in 1955 and I finished this and I had no idea when the next book was going to come out, right? Because there's no internet, so like, or anything. So it's just like, oh, well, I may not know how this cliffhanger ends for like 2 years. I would be very annoyed. And that's one thing I know with cliffhangers. And that's actually a big problem I had, we want to talk about recent stuff. That's a big problem I had with Loki. Because, the show. In case that wasn't obvious. Because season 1, first off, I'm not going to even get into how anticlimactic the last episode is. How you build everything up, and then the last episode is literally just Kang the Conqueror monologuing the whole time. Like, what a complete waste of an episode. You're not going to resolve anything at all. But I'm not going to even, I'm not going to even ignore how it did not do the actual season before it justice. I'm not going to even ignore that. It ends on a giant cliffhanger. Right. That season. When did it come out? Because that was, I think, 2020, right? Loki, season 1 release date. Okay, yeah. So the last episode of Loki was July 2021. We are in April 2023 right now. Or actually, technically, we're in May now. Sorry. So we're in May 2023. It's been a year. It's been a year and 10 months since that first season came out, and we have no idea how that's gonna resolve. Right? Like, it ended on a cliffhanger. And I'm just sitting here being like, how is this going to resolve itself? I have no idea. And that's sort of why I don't like cliffhangers. Like, I just feel like if you're going to do a cliffhanger, you should just not make them wait so long. Like that's, yeah, because like I said, it's been nearly 2 years for Loki, and I want to know how it ends. You got me invested enough to see how this cliffhanger ends, and then you have me wait 2 years. Like, what the fuck? So yeah, I mean, that's the one thing. That's really like the one negative, is I don't like cliffhangers, and this has a cliffhanger ending because it's very clearly, and I get it, right? Like, the book series is Lord of the Rings. It's not like a Fellowship of the Ring and you can stop here. Like, no, it's an epic. This is part 1 of 3, but and it does leave you wanting more, right? Like, if I I wanted to make sure I finished recording this video before I started the Two Towers, just so that information wouldn't, just so I could only talk about this and not talk about the Two Towers. But if I hadn't, if I wasn't doing this, I probably would have started the Two Towers already, just to see how it ends, to see how the cliffhanger resolves itself. But yeah, that's really my one thing. I don't like cliffhangers. Other than that, the plot is really well done, and like even the cliffhanger is really well done. Like, for a cliffhanger, the cliffhanger is done really well. So props to Tolkien, and like I said, the fact that he knew the whole history of Middle Earth before even writing a single page of this is really incredible. So I don't know what else to say. I mean, the plot sort of feels a little, I don't want to say basic, but like it kind of is. And again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Not everything needs to be Tenant. But it really is, I don't know. It's sort of weird because there's many layers to the plot, right? Like, there's lots of layers to everything that's going on here. But at the end of the day, it really does kind of feel like bad guy wants thing that good guy has, and that's bad. Right? Like, I know that's a super oversimplification, but at the same time, it also kind of isn't. But the plot is done really, really well, but the reason why it works is sort of because of everything I mentioned, right? Like all the fine details and all the layers. Because if the plot really was that simple, it wouldn't be, this amazing thing that we all know Lord of the Rings is. And it's because it has all these layers of everything that I just been spending like an hour talking about. So you sort of have all this depth. And one thing I really want to point out is Lorien, Lothlorien, and Galadriel, because that adds a whole nother layer of depth to this. And while it may not initially matter to our heroes, it matters to all of, it matters in the grand scheme of Middle Earth. So their dilemma, again, if you have it, I don't know how much the movie goes into it. Whatever. It's been a while for you. Is Galadriel, in the ruler of Lorien, or I guess co-ruler, has one of the Elven rings. She has Nenya. I don't remember that because when I read that in my head, I go, none your business. I don't remember what they call it now. Let me see. Nenya ring. Ring of adamant. Yep. Which, that's basically why, and this is, again, something that's sort of implied until it's explicitly said, right? Because, Frodo describes it as being Lorien, as being a part of the old world, as sort of being a place that time cannot touch. And then it's revealed that she has this ring, and that's basically what this ring's power is. That's almost stated explicitly, but it's like, yeah, like it sort of puts everything together and it makes sense, especially because Frodo had that realization as they were getting closer to the city. So it's almost like it has a sphere of influence, where it decreases the farther away you get from it. But anyway, so the ring, right? So like, if the one ring is destroyed, Nenya will lose their power. and so Lorien will fade, and it will fade into obscurity, and this lovely land that the elves call home will slowly but surely die away, and that's kind of sad. Especially when you consider, oh man, I would love to go to Lorien. I mean, I don't know. Again, I haven't seen the movies. I don't know if the movie set piece does it justice, but if it does, I would love to go to where it was filmed. Like if I could go see a Lorien in real life, I would want to go see that. So let me say, just because it feels so beautiful and feels so warm, and actually one of my favorite memories of reading these books is this is The Hobbit, but was I've been doing this thing where I've just been sitting outside and just reading, just to get some outside air. It feels good, and everything like that. And there was a warm, sunny day. Well, this must have been in the summer. This shows you how long I've been reading this book, because this must have been, I guess it could have been in the fall. It probably was in the fall, and here we are in spring. Let's say in late summer, early fall. So if you're wondering, again, it took me a while to read because I was trying to absorb everything. The one benchmark I had was I was basically at the end of book 1 on Christmas, right? So on Christmas, I was reading. Actually, unfortunate timing of when had to leave to see family, but had to put the book down. But I was right at the part where Frodo was being chased by the Dark Riders, by the ring wraiths, and then I was like, oh, I have to put it down because it's Christmas and it's family time, and it's like, oh, why can't I finish this chapter? This sucks. But no, family comes first. Obviously, I finish it later. And then I finished this book a couple days ago. So that should show you how long it's been taking me to read. So before that, right? So before that, at the beginning of the book, before I was reading this. So again, late fall, and actually no, I would say late summer, early fall. I was sort of sitting outside reading, and I got to the part with Rivendell, and they're in Rivendell, and it's described as such a happy place, and I'm just sitting outside in the nice warm sun, reading about this place that sort of reflects the nice warm sun and sort of the outside that I'm sitting in, and I don't know, that's really nice. And I sort of get the same vibe from Lorien. I mean, it's sort of a different vibe because Rivendell is homey, which really fed into the nice warm sun, sitting outside, having the time of my life, just reading about a nice place that's so cozy. But Lorien, I would just love to go. I would love to go to Lorien, and I know this has just become a rant about how much I would love to go to Lorien, but it just feels so beautiful, and I really like hiking, and I really like sort of getting lost in nature, and I don't know, it feels like it'd be a beautiful place to go to. So it's sad that, finally we're getting back to it, the main topic at hand. It's sad that, Frodo obviously has to chuck the ring in the volcano. But it's sad that means the death of such a beautiful place, even if it's a slow death. And I think it's also sad that it's mentioned, they mention details that Frodo never sees Lorien again. Tolkien just said that, Frodo never visits Lorien again, and neither does Aragorn. So that's sad. Such a happy place deserves to be seen again, I would think. So, but yeah, right, that's a dilemma, is either Frodo chucks the ring, which starts the slow death of Lorien. He chucks the ring into Mount Doom, which starts the slow death of Lorien, or Sauron gets the ring, and it's only a matter of time until Sauron takes over Lorien and defeats the elves. So the elves are kind of screwed either way. Which is sad, but and again, that's one of those things, right? Because they say, well, it follows Frodo and follows the party, and because it says Frodo and Aragorn never visit Lorien again, it's pretty safe to assume they never go back to Lorien in these books. I mean, maybe there's books. Maybe there's books like that take place after the Lord of the Rings world. Although, from my understanding, they kind of don't, right? Like, from my understanding, I don't know everything, but the Silmarillion is an origin story. The Rings of Power takes place in between the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings. And there was a new book not long ago, like The Fall of Gondor, which I think was after, right? I think it was during the Second Age. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of post Lord of the Rings things, and so maybe there's a reason. I can't really comment on why that may be until I finish Return of the King, but everything seems to be pre Lord of the Rings, so it's kind of sad that like we never see Lorien again. Like I don't know, it sucks. But that's really what I mean when I'm talking about it's these small details that make Lord of the Rings great. Because, like I said, like the fact that the heroes never revisit Lorien means that if you just want a light-hearted adventure, like if you don't want to absorb every detail, that basically means nothing to you because it's not going to have any impact on our heroes. It's not going to have any impact on the main story, but it's going to have a big impact on the world, and like that's a big deal then. And so I don't know, like adding all these layers to it that really may not matter on the surface, just it goes a long way, and that's what I feel like Lord of the Rings does, and that's what I feel like it's best at. And if I were to describe the past hour of me talking, I think that's what I would say. So I guess I should, not a lot more to talk about. I don't know if there's anything else I want to mention. Okay, I will say also I called Boromir being dead in Moria. That one seemed obvious to me. When they said he left and disappeared, I was like, he's probably dead. I mean, they got ran out by orcs, and they said in The Hobbit that it still wasn't seen as that safe a place to go. So it's like, yeah, fortunate, but yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I want to mention. Oh, I guess I will mention. I didn't even touch on what's his name, the human. I can't. Boromir. Now, I don't know why. Actually, this one I am going to look up a picture of. Because I don't know why I always kind of imagined Boromir as, yeah, I know, I completely got it wrong in my head. I wasn't sure what to picture him as, but I kind of viewed him as Craven the Hunter. Hope I can get a picture up. Not in terms of, like, not in terms of like the outfit, although a little bit, but like not kind of that crazy, but in terms of like the facial expressions and everything. Although actually, looking at images, it's not crazy far off. So I don't know, but anyway, I mean, Boromir. Obviously, you look at the ending and you can see that he was tempted by the ring, which is not really a good thing. But, I mean, the ring, it really tempts humans very easily now, does it? And actually, I think this is an interesting theme. Sorry, Boromir. I liked you. And I hope you get good story down the line. It's kind of is what it is. So I'm almost done, I promise. But one thing I wanted to talk about was I really like the theme in here because there is a big theme about it that those who those who are best suited for power are those who don't want it. right? And you sort of have that quote by Gandalf saying, the ring's way to my heart is like through compassion. Like he wants the power to do good, and the ring can give him that, but it will also corrupt him, by just simply by having his, because he does have a desire to power, and even if it's power to be used for good, it's still power, and it will still corrupt him. So, okay, so before I continue, I should say that yes, I know I had to change that. Shit happens, and when you've been, recording for, I've probably been sitting in front of the computer for close to 2 hours at this point. It just happens. So I changed that, but I could wait to, until I can go back to where I was, but I'd rather just knock this boy out, bad boy out, right now, because I think I'm close. Finally. So, yeah, let's do it. So, it's basically like, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? And, like Boromir at the end of the book, he becomes corrupted by the ring also. And he, like he wants to use the ring for good reasons, right? It's not like he wants to go, oh, I'll take over the world, right? And I'll be super evil. It's like, no, his people are dying in a war to Sauron, and he wants to use the ring to stop that war, save his people, and kill the person that's killing so many people. Like, that's not a bad thing, right? Like, it's not a bad thing to inherently want to do, but that power, it would corrupt him, and he would become just as bad, right? Like, you see that with Galadriel, actually. Frodo offers the ring to Galadriel, and Galadriel thinks about it, and she does almost take it, and she, sort of thinks, this is what I do. She sort of has the same thoughts as Boromir, like, I can use this power to stop Sauron, I can use this power to save everyone. But then she realizes that she wouldn't stop there. Like, she has the self-awareness to realize, sort of what Gandalf realized, that she would become just as bad as Sauron. Let me see if I can find the quote. Right. Let me see. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So this is Sam talking to Galadriel. I wish you'd take his ring. You'd put things to rights. You'd stop them digging up the gaffer and turning him adrift. You'd make some folk pay for their dirty work. And this is Galadriel's response. I would, she said. That is how it would begin. But it would not stop with that. Alas, we will not speak more of it. Let us go. Right? So, she knows that, even though she thought about it, she sort of had the self-awareness that she will become just as bad, right? Like, and that's really what's most interesting is the ring is assigned to Frodo, right? Like, you have characters, right? So I just mentioned 3 major characters in this book who would, use the ring for good, right? Like, who are powerful people, because they are, and who would use the ring for good. So you would think that it would make the most sense to give them the ring. Like, they would be the best wielders of it, but they're not, right? And it really is. And I really like this theme. It's because it's sort of it's a paradox, right? The best people, the people best suited for power are the people who never actually want it. Frodo never wants the power of the ring. He doesn't want it. Even when, at the end of the book, at some of the other characters, like those other characters I mentioned, when the ring gives them that vision that it gives Frodo, right at the very end, of everything going to shit. right? Of the orcs, marching out of the mountains, of men being Gondor being, slain, of the elves being in trouble. Many of them they would have the Anakin response. Now I'm doing the ultimate crossover, right? Like, how can I stop it? How can I strengthen my power to stop it? What can I do to stop it? And, I need more power to be able to save everyone. And Frodo doesn't do that, right? Frodo never once thinks of using the ring for his power, for his own personal gain. He doesn't even want to put it on at the end there. But he just sort of feels like he has no other choice because otherwise Boromir would steal it from him. So, again, I really, really like that. And it's sort of something that I believe in my day-to-day life, too. Saying it that way, but yeah, it really does feel like, especially in a modern life, those who seek power are not fit for it because the power will corrupt them, and those who are best suited for power are those who don't want it. It's like, I guess what to call it anything, the Peter Parker effect. Because he didn't want it either. Peter didn't want it either, but it was thrust upon him, and he's not going to let it go to waste. He wasn't going to let the power go to waste. So, yeah. I guess the last thing I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about very, very briefly, because obviously you see the bottom. You can see how long I've been talking for. But, man, there were just so many good quotes in this book. I could try to pull it up on my phone. I've been trying to be better about collecting good quotes from my phone. And let me see if I can pull up some ones I really like. Here's a good one, actually. This is from the end. Memory is not what the heart desires. It is only a mirror. Be it as clear as Khazad-dum. I don't know. I have no idea if I pronounced that right, but I like the sense of it. It's from Gimli. Let's see. This one's pretty funny, I think. Actually, this one changes a lot with quarantine. I think this one gets a lot of new context. But I've never been out of my own land before, and if I had known what the world outside was like, I don't think I should have had the heart to leave it. Sam. And thinking of that with respect to how the world has been the past couple of years, I think is really funny. This one's actually really just good. Like, this one's just really good. Indeed, in nothing is the power of the Dark Lord more clearly shown than in the estrangement that divides all who oppose him. A house divided upon itself cannot stand. Abe Lincoln. Just saying. That one was by Haldir. I already put one in Clone Wars, so I'm not going to repeat that one. I don't know. Like, there's just so many great quotes in this that can apply to so much aspects of life, and it's really incredible. Like, how long did it take Tolkien to write this? I don't know, but he certainly did his job. Okay, so here we go again. This is the fourth retape, I guess. Not retape. It's not a retape. But this will be the fourth time I'm filming footage for this review. So I was doing it in editing, and I'm mostly done at this point. By the time I'm recording, I'm mostly done editing. I thought I was done recording all the footage. I've actually started the Two Towers, so I read the first chapter. I'm in the second one now. I'm not going to talk about that here, but I sort of realized that while recording, while watching all this back and thinking about it, that I didn't go into, I went into some aspects of the plot, but I mostly went over a lot of the other stuff that makes this book great, not just the plot. So I wanted to, there we go, that looks so much better. So I wanted to get into more of the nitty-gritty of the plot. And so I was going to do, in honor of, I guess, Quinn Reviews, because I recently did rewatch of the Victoria stuff, where he went episode by episode. I think I'm gonna go chapter by chapter, and so this segment's definitely going to be a little bit. I'm trying to see how many chapters there are, and just sort of go into more details about the plot and what I think and everything like that. So I don't know where exactly I'm going to put this in the video. I know it's going to be close to the end because, you know, as editing, that's definitely the best spot for it. Where's the table of contents? Prologue. Contents, here we go. Okay, there's a lot of chapters in here. There's 12 in book 1 and 10 in book 2, so there's 22 chapters. So this segment might be a little bit long, but let's get into it. Okay, so book 1, chapter 1, a long expected party. Here, I'll try to put chapter on the screen. A long expected party. So how does this book start? This book starts with Bilbo's party, right? You know, his 11th-1st, right? Isn't that what it is? Yes, 11th-1st. So 111, which, as they say, is long for a hobbit. I wonder why he could have his life prolonged. You know, only some mischievous force in the background. And this chapter, I like what it does. I mean, it's not, I want to say, super consequential. It sort of just sets up, you know, everything for the story, you know, for the story to unfold. But I think it does a good tie-in of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So don't forget, this is essentially a sequel to The Hobbit, right? You know, The Hobbit was written first, and this takes place afterwards, you know, and follows the nephew, cousin, weird, you know, it was a weird relationship, but whatever, you know, relative that Bilbo took in as almost his own, like, son, nephew kind of thing. So this was a good way to tie the movies together. I mean, not in the movies. Tie the books together, was to have this party and, you know, sort of catch up on Bilbo, see how he's doing. And of course we know he left, but of course, you know, we know, again, I'm not gonna hide about spoilers or anything. We know where he, you know, because this whole thing has been talking about spoilers. We know where he winds up. You know, and I find it interesting that sort of where he does wind up. So I guess let's talk about Bilbo, right? So he leaves the ring behind for Frodo, and then he leaves, and then he goes to the Lonely Mountain, and you know, does make it there, but then comes back to Rivendell, and he comes back to Rivendell because actually, did he? Maybe I'm confused, but I'm pretty sure he did make it to the Lonely Mountain. I don't think he just stopped in Rivendell. No, yeah, because he was escorted. He was escorted to the Lonely Mountain by the dwarves the second time. But, like, I don't think they would have just dropped him off and ran. But anyway, so when in the shadow of the past, you know, Gandalf found out through Gollum that Sauron had the ring. I mean, not Sauron had the ring. That Sauron knew the ring was alive, and Gandalf was figuring out that, you know, the ring was the One Ring, which I will get to, because that's the next chapter. You know, Bilbo, you know, word gets back to Bilbo about this, and Gandalf presumably says, go to Rivendell and hide there. And again, I could be mistaking events in my head, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And then Bilbo stays in Rivendell the whole time, because smartly, I mean, Gandalf, I don't think is wrong in this, that Sauron was probably looking for Bilbo Baggins, the one who had taken his One Ring. And even if Sauron had found Bilbo, or Sauron's agents had found Bilbo, and discovered that he no longer had the ring, probably wouldn't have not have gone that well for him. So it's smart to have put him in Rivendell. And it's interesting that that they sort of waited for that reveal, right? Because there's in chapter 3, when they meet Gildor, Frodo asked him about Bilbo. Have you seen Bilbo? And he said, yes, far away from here. I presume he means Rivendell. He could mean the Lonely Mountain, but I presume he does mean, because Bilbo was back in Rivendell at that point, that he saw Bilbo in Rivendell. But, again, so they sort of closet that reveal, and I think they did a good job. And it's interesting. I liked Bilbo. I liked him in The Hobbit, and I liked him here. Again, obviously he's not the main part of this story, but it's so cool to see, this character back. And it's also cool that we sort of, we get, to catch up with the dwarves a little bit. I mean, like, we don't see them aside from the one who's in the Council of Elrond. Again, I don't remember. Let's see who Gimli's father is. Gimli father. Gloin. I think I was right in saying that Gimli was Gloin and that Gloin was his father. I have to look. But so Gloin tells Frodo sort of what's happened in between books, and he tells them that the dwarves have been prosperous. They lost a couple. Balin went to try to retake Moria, and I've already discussed how that did not go well. Aside, they had some mysterious deaths. I think that's what it was. They had some people like just, 2 of them just randomly die, presumably out of nowhere, and one of the dwarf neighbors in the south was confronted by a ring wraith, and so that's it. So again, it's cool. Obviously they're not the main focus of the story, and I would be very surprised if Frodo goes to the Lonely Mountain, considering how, or any of them really do, just because it's so out of the way, right? Like they're in the south below it, like right now where I am in the Two Towers, they're southeast, right? No, southwest. They're southwest. Obviously Frodo has to go east, but the destination is southwest. The destination is southwest for Frodo, and so like why would he go up there? And I don't see, unless so I guess I'm not going to really talk about what happens, in the first chapter of the Two Towers, because quite a bit happens. But, and I'm going to say that for the Two Towers video, but I don't see them making their way to the the rest of the party making their way to the Lonely Mountain either. But it's so cool to get that update. And so that's cool. It does a good transition. It sets everything up well. No complaints here. Get to a really interesting chapter. Chapter 2, Shadow of the Past. This is the one where basically everything about the ring and the situation is revealed. Gandalf reveals what he knows to Frodo about the ring. He was also in and out for quite a while. I think it was like 7 years? Yeah, I think it was like 7 years. Like 7 or 8 years. It was a long time. Which I didn't expect. Actually, that there was such a time skip, between Bilbo's birthday and Frodo's journey, but there was like 7 or 8 years, something like that. And then, Gandalf comes back and sort of reveals everything that he knows, which is that this ring is obviously the one ring to rule them all. Sauron wants it back. And Frodo must journey to Mount Doom, to throw the ring in the volcano. And so it really, right, the first chapter really sort of transitioned from The Hobbit to Lord of the Rings, and this one really put everything in motion. And we also get the backstory of Gollum in this one. I mean, this is mostly just you know, Gandalf said this is mostly like a guesstimate. Right? I mean, not a guesstimate, an educated guess, right? Like, he sort of filled in the gaps. He was able to figure out some stuff, but he sort of filled in the gaps also. And that's really, really interesting. Really interesting to know that he was a hobbit, you know, who became corrupted by the ring. And that whole backstory, it's just, it's really interesting, and it's really cool world building. You know, that we even know, like, where he grew up. Like, he grew up on the other side, I believe it was on the other side of, near Anduin, near Mirkwood. It was on the other side of the Misty Mountains, but not far from the Misty Mountains. Pretty sure it was, like, northern Anduin, near Mirkwood. Somewhere around there. And again, it's really cool backstory, but also something I was thinking about, you know, what I was going to say for these sections. And something that really struck me, you know, thinking about this chapter again, and knowing, you know, what we know about what happens in the rest, is what Gandalf says about the advice he received from Saruman at this time, right? So, at this point in the story, Gandalf does not know that Saruman is evil. You know, Saruman, so I guess, spoilers. But, not really. I mean, I'm talking about spoilers this whole video, but whatever. So, Saruman, you know, so basically, if you don't know, you don't remember, whatever, Gandalf is part of, like, this council, you know, Gandalf the Grey. And the leader of this council, and there was also another one, I don't remember. He had to deal with a lot of nature. Let's see. Ragadad? Gandalf the Grey Council. White Council. Here we go. Ragadast the Brown. There we go. Yeah, so Ragadast. You know, those are the only three we meet, you know, in the council. And their leader is Saruman. Saruman the White. And Saruman studied these rings. And when Gandalf told, you know, this is revealed in this chapter. And when Gandalf went to Saruman for advice, saying, this ring, you know, it was discovered, it seems to be powerful, you know, like, what's going on here? Saruman assured Gandalf that the One Ring was forever lost in Anduin, never, you know, would never be found again, and it cannot possibly be the One Ring, you know, to leave it alone, it's not a problem. And so Gandalf listened to that advice, and he didn't think anything of it until the end of the first chapter, where Bilbo, you know, couldn't part with the ring, and he almost became like Gollum, saying, "My precious," and, you know, you sort of see how much power the ring had held over him, and, you know, that's when Gandalf really starts to question everything, you know, and sort of go, maybe Saruman's wrong, this might be a really big issue. And so through some investigating, he finds out it is the One Ring, although, you know, he proves it by tossing the ring into the fire and seeing the verse, although he was pretty convinced before then. But what's interesting about that is, so we know what happens with Saruman, right? So we know Saruman is evil, and he desires the One Ring for himself, and he wants to use, I don't remember what power he wants to use it for, but it's like, he wants to use the power, you know, it's sort of like Boromir, what Boromir wanted the ring for. He wanted to use the ring to destroy Sauron and bring about a new order, you know? Bring about peace, right? I brought peace, justice, what's the line? And prosperity to my new empire. Hold on. This is Obi-Wan. Don't make me kill you. Let me find it. That's the lightsaber fight. Here we go. Here we go. I brought peace, justice, freedom, and security to my new empire. That's basically what Saruman wants to do. I don't know if I entered the clip there, but yeah, and so...
Don't lecture me, Obi-Wan. I see through the lies of the Jedi. I do not fear the dark side as you do. I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire.
It's interesting because did Saruman know, like at this point, you know, because we know that he was corrupted at some point, but Gandalf was asking this advice years ago. Was Saruman already corrupted at that point? It's an interesting question, because then Saruman could have been giving Gandalf, you know, false advice, right? You know, he could have been giving this. I mean, he was giving him wrong advice, but he could have knowingly gave Gandalf this false advice so he could try and sneak the ring, you know, so he could try and steal it for himself somehow. And I don't know, it's an interesting question to think about. I don't know if the answer ever is somewhere, or maybe it's explained in these two books somehow. But either way, it's certainly interesting to think about. And that chapter sets up everything quite well. Chapter 3 is company. So, this chapter, I'm also going to kind of blend this together with chapter 4. Chapter 4, a shortcut to mushrooms. We're just going to blend them together. Because these are both the same thing. I mean, they're the same story. Not really, but like, this is both Frodo, Pippin. It was Pippin, right? It was Merry or Pippin. I did this earlier, and I'm pretty sure it was Pippin. Yeah, Pippin. Frodo, Pippin, and Sam walking to Frodo's new house at the end of the Shire, where they will slip away without a problem. And this is their first encounter with the Ringwraiths, too. So right as they're leaving, they see a Ringwraith go on Sam's dad, right? You know, the gaffer, which is Sam's dad, right? That's Sam's dad. And, you know, ask for information, and then the Ringwraiths, they are pursuing Frodo. They don't really know what they are. And this is also where they have an encounter with Gildor and with Farmer Maggot. I mean, Farmer Maggot is in the next chapter, Shortcut to Mushrooms. But they're both, you know, at this point, trying to skirt around Ringwraiths. And I find, so I'll talk about the encounter with Gildor a little bit. I find that to be quite interesting. Again, because it's one of those things like I was talking about with Lorien. It doesn't really matter in terms of grand scheme of things, right? So they're going west. They're going to the sea, and presumably they're going to sail to whatever. You know, they mentioned, and again, I was talking about the world building, something they mentioned before, that there was this island to the west. And I'm pretty sure that's where the elves came from. You know, that's whatever Holy Land they were in before Middle Earth. You know, before they came to Middle Earth, and everyone else that came to Middle Earth is just kind of stays in Middle Earth. They don't have the resources or really the ability or whatever to go out there and sail. But so they're heading to Middle Earth because, I mean, they're heading to that other place, presumably to get away from this war and everything that's going on, you know, because Middle Earth is no longer safe. But it's, or maybe they could be gathering resources to come back, but that's sort of what I gathered, is they sort of feel like it's safer over there. And then they know what the Ringwraiths are, but they don't really disclose anything. And it also has one of the most interesting lines in the book for me. It's like advice. Elves seldom do not give out unguarded advice, you know, because advice is often harmful. You know, I'm sure they've seen, you know, don't forget elves are immortal, right? And so I'm sure they've seen wars started based off of bad advice. So, you know, but it's still an interesting encounter. You know, the elves realize how important Frodo's journey is, but they also can't forsake their own. So they kind of stop and help him out for a second, and then it's okay, Frodo, go on your way. But again, it's an interesting capture. It's an interesting thing for the world building, and it's an interesting thing, just in general. You know, in terms of, I talked earlier about the elves and dwarves relationship, right? And you know, I think this encounter does a lot to build up the elves, right? You know, especially like they knew how dire it was, which is why they even though Gildor was hesitant to do so, they did give him advice, you know, because Frodo wasn't sure about whether to wait for Gandalf, and he sort of hinted at these ring wraiths being, you know, which they didn't know at the time were ring wraiths, sort of being bad things, you know, and it's like, not like you don't want to stay here in this one place for that long. Like you have to keep moving, even though you don't know where Gandalf is. And so, again, it does a lot to add to the elves, and it does a lot to add to the world building. And so that's a really cool part. And then Farmer Maggot, I mean, that's cute. It's neat. Again, more world building. There's not a ton to say with Farmer Maggot. Unless he comes back later, or his relevance comes back later. But also what's important for Gildor, actually, I forgot about this. What's also important for Gildor is he sends out messages. That becomes very important. The fact that Gildor sends out messages saying, you know, saying what's going on, you know, and this journey is important. And that becomes very important because that's how Tom Bombadil finds them. And that's how the elf that escorts Frodo to Rivendell, I don't remember his name, finds them, and sort of, you know, or at least is on the lookout, right? Like, you know, that's how they're aware of all of this. So it's still very important to the story, but it's just they sort of have their own business to take care of, and they have to go on their way, but they help when they can. And that's really what it feels like with Farmer Maggot too, is that, you know, I mean, you have that little backstory about like Frodo playing in the mushrooms and Farmer Maggot being annoyed, but Farmer Maggot just helps him out, you know? He's like, I can tell bad things swirling around here. You know, he had a ring wraith come ask him for information. So he's just a nice dude. And so this is an interesting part of the story, definitely to say the least, and it does a lot for the world and for the world building, which I've talked so much about how great this is. Chapter 5, The Conspiracy Unmasked. So, this one, it's really just nice. This one is one of the most wholesome chapters in the book. You know, Merry and Pippin are on to Frodo saying that they know he's going to leave and try to sneak out, and they don't, you know, and Frodo sort of says this is you know, Frodo confesses that that's true, but, and they're like, oh, we want to go with you, and Frodo says this is incredibly dangerous, you don't know what you're getting yourself into, and they are just so wholesome, and they're like, we don't care, you know, we're not going to let you walk into the dark by yourself, which is what Sam does, at the end of the book, and so, it was really wholesome and really sweet, and even poor, Fatty Bulger, I believe that's his name, saying, you know, he was going to stay behind and try to make sure, try to stall out the ring wraiths as long as he could by pretending that Frodo was still there as best as he could. But that's really what this chapter is, and it's really sweet, and it's sort of like their last dinner before their journey begins, and so it's really cool. Again, there's not a ton to talk about this chapter, but it's just really wholesome that Merry and Pippin are like, you're not going to do this by yourself. We're not going to let that happen. And poor Fatty Bulger, honestly. I mean, he gets out alive, but I don't think it's in this chapter. I think it's the Old Forest or Tom Bombadil. You know, but one of those chapters. you find out that he had to run for his life from these things, and that they sort of knocked down the door to get into the house, and he had to run for, Fatty had to run for his life. He couldn't keep the facade up anymore, and if he wanted to stay alive, he had to run and get out of there and try to get some help. So, he really put his life on the, even him, right? Like, he put his life on the line for them too. And it's just like these small deeds of kindness, or, they just go a long way. And I really like that. I really like that aspect of the book, that sort of anyone can make a difference, It doesn't matter what species you are, it doesn't matter how tall you are, Nice things are nice things, and, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Chapter 6. The Old Forest. This one was creepy. Like, seriously creepy. I read, a verse from it earlier about how the forest was creepy, like how the whole time they were in the forest, they felt like they were being spied on. And that feels just, Tolkien did a good job with both this one, with the Old Forest here, and in Mirkwood in The Hobbit, which again, I'll be surprised if the characters visit, because they are currently south of Mirkwood. And considering their destination is south, they have no reason to really go up that way. But he sort of, he caught the vibe well of being very cramped and claustrophobic, but also being huge, right? And especially with Mirkwood in the first one, Hobbit, where you felt like you never moment of peace. The forest was always watching you, but the forest was all, so in that way it felt so cramped, but it also felt huge, right? It felt inescapable. There's no way you're gonna get out, and that's replicated in the Old Forest. And the difference with this one is the forest is even more sentient, right? It feels like the trees almost turn to look at the hobbits, and they really direct them in a way, right? Like they try to just do a straight line through, but the forest keeps leading them to the center by having trees block their path, to the way they're gonna go, and showing them, I don't want to say crates, like wagons of other people's wagons that have gone lost in here, to basically say, you keep disobeying us, you're going to wind up like this, and nobody's gonna ever see or hear you again. Like, isn't that just a pleasant thought to have? But yeah, this is really creepy. The atmosphere in this one was really intense and great. And then, of course, you have, so eventually, they eventually can't resist it, and they just, no matter how much they try to resist, they get pulled to the center of the forest. There's this giant willow, and they almost die. And then here comes Tom Bombadil to rescue them all and save the day. I'm going to talk about the end of that chapter, Tom Bombadil saving them, with, as well as chapter 7 in the House of Tom Bombadil. And I might loop, I might or might not, I probably will loop in parts of, because Tom Bombadil's important in chapter 8, also Fog on the Barrow Downs. So I'll probably be talking about those 3 chapters in Liberty in this section. Tom Bombadil, he is, again, you talk about depth, right? And again, I've talked about this so much. This video is going to be over 2 hours, and most of it is me talking about how these nitty-gritty details and the world building is so important. But here's another example. I mean, Tom Bombadil is so important to the overall story. I know he got cut out of the movie. But, like, he's still important, right? Like, he still matters a lot to the world, and not just because he saves Frodo, twice. He saves him in the Old Forest. He saves him when they're getting attacked by the ghost people, in the Barrow Downs. But Tom Bombadil does a lot for the story. I mean, and I know just me because he's like clearly some form of deity, right? He's some form, he's a deity that's married to a river spirit that's just hanging out and enjoying his life. But it does so much for the world, and just because of that. And it also ties in well with the theme that I know there's going to be put in before or after I talk about this, and with the previous footage. I'm guessing it's going to be put in after, but just in case it's not, I talked about before, when recording my other stuff, about how, about how important, the book clearly emphasizes the people who best want power are those, those who don't want it. Best suited for power are those who don't want it. But like, it sort of applies this theme here, but also sort of doesn't, because Tom Bombadil, right? Like even though you don't want the power, you have to be willing to use it for good. Also, like, it's a weird mix, because Tom Bombadil isn't corrupted by the ring at all, right? Like, so he straight up in this chapter, in the chapter where they're at his house, he straight up puts the ring on, and it does absolutely nothing for him. And he sees Frodo when he's invisible, and it does absolutely not, right? Like, the ring has zero control over him, and it's because he has no intention of doing anything with his life but just enjoying it with his wife. The river deity. And he doesn't need the power, right? Gandalf says, I could use the power, which is why it corrupt me. Saruman wants the power to make a better, Saruman and Boromir want the power to make a better world, right? And Frodo, to that extent, does too. I mean, he doesn't get corrupted by it like they do, but the ring still has a little bit of power over him, because otherwise, Frodo wants to make the world a better place. And again, this is weird because it's not saying that Tom Bombadil doesn't want to make the world a better place. It's just saying he's going to live his best life. And Tom Bombadil's best life is just hanging out in the woods with the river spirit. That's his wife that he loves, and that's what he's going to keep on doing. And so what does he need the power for? He doesn't. Gandalf could use the power to defeat Saruman. Frodo could use the power to defeat Sauron. And even though he doesn't want to use the power, even though he doesn't want to take up arms, he still could, right? Think about what the ring shows Frodo at the end, in the last chapter. He sees orcs swarming out of nowhere. Orcs swarming out of the mountains, the people in Gondor falling. I don't remember what else he sees. His friends in peril, everything like that. And it's almost like the ring is egging him. Don't you want to fix this? Use me. Sort of like the ring was saying to him, these are things that's going to happen. You can use me to fix them. Use me to fix them. Become corrupted, and you lead me right to, and you'll either be my new master or you'll lead me right to my old master. And while Frodo does not want to take up arms, he's clearly aware of these problems and wants to do things to fix them, but he's also aware, but he himself also knows that he's doing the best thing to fix them by going on this journey and by taking the ring and throwing it in Mount Doom. And so that's the thing with Frodo. And I think Tom Bombadil, he's already very powerful. You see it through this chapter. The fact that he's able to just, save these people from these powerful creatures twice, and he's able to do pretty incredible things, right? You know, the river spirit makes it incredibly clear that no evil, you know, goes through the walls, right? Like, you know, she says that, like, sleep soundly, no evil creeps through these walls. It shows that he has the power to do these things, and he doesn't need it. So he doesn't need the ring. What does he need the ring for? He's using the power to live his best life, and if evil comes his way, he will most certainly deal with it. But he doesn't need the power. He doesn't. Not only does he need the power, he doesn't want it, and he doesn't care for it, which is why the ring has no power over him. And so that's really the importance of Tom Bombadil in this story. Is everything I'm just ranting about is just that you need to want power for the ring to control you, and even if it's a power to do good, even you know, in Frodo's case, I think it's the power to finish the journey and do what's right. And Tom Bombadil, he's like, I'm just hanging out with my wife, and you know, any evil that comes my way shall meet its end, but I'm just here chilling. I don't need power. I don't want power. I'm living my best life right now. And so I think Tom Bombadil is really someone that we should all aspire to be, right? You know, while everyone else is focusing on what they don't have, and that's what the ring is, that's how the ring is able to corrupt them and lead them. Tom Bombadil is just focusing on what he does have, and what he does have is a great life. You know, you don't need power. You don't need power to make your life better when your life is already great. So, I think that's what we should all take from Tom Bombadil. I will touch on briefly Chapter 8, Fog on the Barrow Downs. Again, it's another case of they get trapped and Tom Bombadil rescues them, but he says, I can't rescue again because I can't leave my lady. You know, leave the river spirit, and my life is here, and I'm gonna stay here. What you call it? Oh, I just wanted to talk about the atmosphere again, just because it's so creepy. The fact that they are lured to sleep again, second time Tom Bombadil had to save them, involving luring to sleep. Where they had lured to sleep in front of a grave, and suddenly it's like nighttime. It's like, oh shit, it's nighttime. There's these ghost things around us. This is really bad. And then you have the whole creepy scene where they're separated by the fog and they're captured. It's just really well done, and it would be interesting to sort of see more, you know, see more of this lore and everything like that. But for now, this is just what we got. So. This is another cool action set piece, and another really creepy one also. You know, horror movies, you can feel free to look at this chapter and, you know, because it does a good job. And because Tom Bombadil is cut from the movie, I know he's cut, I'm assuming this chapter is also cut, or they find a completely different way to escape from it. But again, it doesn't impact the story a lot, just from being more world building, just from being a really creepy chapter. So that's all I'm going to touch on about that. Chapter 9, At the Sign of the Prancing Pony, and I'm also going to loop that in with Chapter 10, Strider. So this is where they go to the Prancing Pony. They get the message from Gandalf that's in the second chapter, but they get the message, you know, from Gandalf that Butterbear wasn't able to deliver, that said that Frodo should have left earlier, because he heard of, you know, there were bad things about it, and he knew that Sauron was aware of all these things going on, or Frodo better get his ass moving. But obviously Frodo didn't get that. And this is also Aragorn's introduction, who I've already talked about at length. But it's interesting that he's referred to as Strider, you know, here. Just referred to as a gruff looking man, but he's really not. Again, I'm not going to go into Aragorn in detail. But one thing I found interesting is one thing I totally forgot about. And it's interesting to see how the movie does it when you're talking about lighting, right? I talked about lighting a lot earlier, way earlier, like at the beginning, beginning of this long rant. But I reread this book before. I read this book before, and I didn't remember that room being that dark as it was, because this room is described as being really, really dark. And I don't mean like thematically. I mean like there's just like 4 little torches, on the walls, and you kind of can't really see anybody otherwise. But yeah, they were really stupid going to the party, and I sort of feel like they were tempted by the ring, and especially with the disappearing act. That is totally the workings of the ring, where Frodo's singing the song, he got drunk. What's the line? Like, fly me to the moon or whatever, and then he like falls, and then the ring slips on his finger. That's totally the ring is doing. The ring was trying to. Ring was 100% there trying to sell Frodo out. Saying, up, you're about to be discovered. My master's gonna come get you. You're about to be in trouble now. So that was really interesting, and I guess at this point Frodo becomes more aware of how tempting the ring can be. He sort of realizes, and Aragorn helps put that all into perspective too, and so Aragorn obviously joins them. But overall, this was a really cool chapter also. It was cool seeing Bree, and obviously there's a lot more to talk about with this chapter, but the thing is, this chapter, the main purpose of this chapter is to introduce Aragorn. And I've already talked about length at him, so I don't want to, for the sake of not repeating, I'm just going to move on. Good chapter, though. Alright, so here we go. Chapter 11. A Knife in the Dark. So this one is about them heading towards Rivendell, and they're debating whether to go to Weathertop, the Weathertop Hill, thinking that Gandalf may have left a sign there. And they find out that that was actually very true. They do find out that Gandalf left a sign, but that he was in combat, and so couldn't really leave them much of a message. He was attacked by the ring wraiths at that point. And then so they go to Weathertop, which sells them out to the ring wraiths. The ring wraiths figure it out. And this is all actually where I mentioned this earlier, where they talk about the similarians. They briefly mentioned some of the stuff that happens there. And I find it really interesting. This part in particular, I don't know why this one in particular reminds me of Breath of the Wild. So I guess, to be clear, if I'm having trouble, when I'm reading this book, if I have trouble picturing something, I just picture what it would look like in Breath of the Wild. Just because I think it's a really, really good base for this, to sort of imagine it. But this one in particular really reminds me of that, because they're sort of hiding in between the mountains. This is also where, it's either in this chapter or in the next chapter, where they find the trolls from The Hobbit. But that's fun. But, where they're kind of hiding in between the mountains, and then Aragorn talks about the, last march of Gil-galad, and sort of everything like that. And that was cool. It's cool getting that history, and I don't know why, that scene of them kind of crawling, walking in between mountains, and you have, these stone things to the right and everything. You're being reminded of Gil-galad. Makes you think of Breath of the Wild. But anyway, then you have, and that's all cool. This is really cool. This is a really good chapter. And then you have Frodo get, you have the ring wraiths attacking. And what's curious about that is you sort of see what's under the hood for a little bit. In that Frodo, he can't resist it anymore, and he slips the ring on. When the ring wraiths are attacking him, and he's able to see, right? Because they said it, Aragorn said it, or Gandalf said it, I don't remember when. that, the ring brings you to their world, right? It sort of distorts you, and it brings you to closer to the shadow world, and that's why he's able to see what's underneath the hood, and he's able to see old human figures, right? Like these were kings, and so you sort of get a little bit of backstory, or you can sort of put two and two together, on what happened to them and who they were, right? Sauron clearly tricked them. He gave these humans, these rulers, rings promising them power, because large theme of this book, absolute power corrupts absolutely, promising them great things, and then they succumbed to the power, and they became his undead servants. And so that's cool. It's a cool thing to see, and it'll be interesting to see whether we get more of them, whether we get more of the lore. Gildor says that Frodo, by the end of his journey, Frodo will learn more, will know more about the ring wraiths than himself. So it'll be cool to see if we actually do figure that out. I mean, I already said we kind of figured out a lot of that already, but but it's still, it'll be interesting to see how much lore do we get about these kings, these strong people who were tempted by Sauron. I don't know, but this was another really solid chapter. This book is, it's a really good book. What's there to say? Next. Alright, so now we have the finale of Book 1, Chapter 12. Chapter 12, Flight to the Ford. So this is, at the end of the last chapter, Frodo was stabbed by the ring wraiths, and he's kind of dying. He's not in a good spot. And so the ring wraiths, they pursue. They're in hot pursuit. And their goal is to make it to Rivendell before Frodo dies. And they just barely do. But this was a really cool chapter. This was a really cool, race against the clock chapter. And you still get some more lore, right? This is the chapter, I'm pretty sure, where they find out about, where I'm looking now, and this is the chapter where they find the trolls. So it's a cool connection. I remember actually thinking when reading this, when reading this part, sort of remembering The Hobbit and thinking, well, it was right about here, when they found the trolls or whatever. I remember sort of thinking, it was right about here. It was a little before Rivendell that they did find the trolls. So I wonder, is this, so this is that same area, Frodo, because Frodo, up to this point, kind of followed their footsteps. I mean, I don't think they stopped in Bree. I mean, it was different because they didn't go to the old forest or anything. But they did go south, right? So I don't know. They didn't take quite the same route, but at this point they were. So that was a fun thing to note. And of course, they got, after Rivendell is where the two paths completely diverge, and Frodo goes completely different to Bilbo, because they head south, and they go through Moria, when Bilbo goes right through the Misty Mountains. They try to go around the Misty Mountains, but then they get tricked by, then they get captured by orcs. Then Bilbo meets Gollum. They get the ring. They go that way. Then they meet Bjorn. Go through Mirkwood. And meanwhile Frodo goes south. But it's that cool crossover that their paths intertwined again. That was really cool to see. And this whole chapter was really tense. It was really nerve-breaking, and it was really, really good, and especially that ending. The ending where, they find the elf, and the elf brings them to brings Frodo to Rivendell, and you have that big chase scene where I hope the movie, I'll see when I do, the review, but damn, I hope the movie does this scene justice, because it is so good in the books. Where in the book, where Frodo's on a horse, is running, and suddenly, there's two ringers behind him, and suddenly you see around him the rest of them, right? All 9 of them were all there at the same time, and they were trying to surround and trap Frodo, and you think he's like absolutely screwed, and it's like, what's gonna happen? It's intense, it's amazing. This is easily one of the best scenes out of this book. And like, even if you just want, I would recommend reading the scene. Like, even if you've only seen the movies, just read this scene. It's so good. And so this was a great scene, a great part. And again, the whole crunch against the clock thing was really, really cool also. So this is another solid chapter. This gets another really big thumbs up for me, and it's a great way to end book 1 too, with quite a climax of does Frodo make it out alive? You don't even really know if Frodo makes it out alive, I think. Let me see how it ends, because Frodo blacks out at the end. Alright, here we are. This should be, and I think it will be, because if it isn't, I'll be going a little mad. But my final recording session for my Fellowship of the Ring review, and a review that I thought it would be over an hour, is probably now stretching closer to 2.5. This, when it's all said and done, this will probably be pretty close to the runtime of the actual movie. But so something came up again, as things do when you've been sitting in front of the computer for an hour. It turns out you can't spend all day sitting in front of the computer for an hour talking. But I was right that Frodo did black out, so you don't even fully know what happened. And so if you were to make the movie just out of that one part, you really could talk. You could like do a little bit of the first chapter of book 2, where Gandalf sort of gives a little, insight onto what happened, but not that much. Like, that would seem an okay place to stop the movie. Probably where I would stop it. But still, if I were to give a review of book 1, right? If I were to give a review of book 1, I mean, it's good. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say it's good, but book 2 is, in my opinion, it's a lot better. I think the pace is better. I think, so like just to give an example, this first part of the book is just from the Shire to Rivendell. Let me see, so the it's this many pages, right? This right here. This is how many pages it takes to go from Shire to Rivendell. 209 pages. And here's The Hobbit, right? So, chapter 1. They get to Rivendell in the 3rd chapter, right? They arrive on Rivendell, on like page 45. And this is even with bigger text. So like, that's a huge difference. And I obviously, like, book 1's important. I'm not going to sit here and say book 1 isn't important, but I feel like it just moves a little too slow at times. But it has some great parts in there. I talked about how great some of the stuff is. I like Tom Bombadil a lot. I liked that ending scene. I liked Weathertop, and everything surrounding there. But it sort of feels like it takes a while to just sort of get up and get moving, And, but the thing is about book 1, it's really, book 1 lays the foundation so book 2 can go out and kill it, is basically how I feel about book 1. Like, book 1, even though it's slower and then, not as much happens, it's still incredibly important, right? Like, it lays everything in place so that, the first second half of the book can sort of run wild, right? And also just I don't know if I'll be able to pull up the map. I don't know if I'll be able to properly show like what I mean by like but let's see. Where's the Shire? Yeah, I mean, so I don't know how much you guys will be able to properly see them. There we go. Okay, so let me find where's the Shire. Shire here. And so this is where they started in book 1. And they ended... Where's Rivendell? It's like over here somewhere. It's like around here. Yep. So this is where they went. You know, between the two fingers is where it took them those 200 pages to go. And then from there... I actually need to switch to a separate map. Because this map 1 doesn't hold where they go, so I gotta go to the more general map to show where they went in the second half. Yeah, see, so Rivendell's here. They go down in book 2, they go down, and don't forget, this is a more zoomed out version of them, you know, like that map that I just showed is just this top corner. So this is a more zoomed out version of Middle Earth, but so they started here, in Rivendell, and then they went down this way, to somewhere around here, Moria, you can see it right here, Moria. So, they went from Rivendell, down this way here, in here, through here, through the mountains here, to Lorien, down the river, and then they wind up here, you know, at the end of the book. Right? Like, it's a lot more happening, and so there's a lot more going on, and so, obviously, like I said, book 1 is very important for the exposition, but, listen, I'm not going to be talking about book 2 as much. You know why? Because I just spent most of the video that you're watching talking about book 2 and everything I liked in book 2. So, I think it's pretty clear where I stand on that. But onwards to book 2. Okay, so book 2, chapter 1, many meetings. And I'm going to also tie this in with... Chapter 2, the Council of Elrond. What a way to start this book, because this is a really great way to start it, right? So many meanings. It sort of reminds me of that part in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone where Harry wakes up in the hospital surrounded by Dumbledore, and Dumbledore sort of explains everything that happened to Harry, you know, that happened in the climax, because Harry, you know, blacked out at the end and wasn't even sure himself. That's basically what the first part of Many Meanings is like, and that's probably where I would end, you know, talking about the movie. You know, probably end a little there, give him a little tease about what happened, but then sort of end the movie saying, oh, you want to see what happens next, go watch the next one. But so that's really how it starts. And then, you know, I feel we're talking about this chapter because these chapters, you know, this is going to happen to me a lot when book 2. I feel like I talked about this stuff a lot already. I really did, right? You know, because Frodo also sees Bilbo again, which I already talked about. And it's interesting to see that the ring still holds a lot of power over Bilbo. You know, where he gets that second where he says to Frodo, can I see it? And he gets that corrupted power look over his face. It shows that even though hasn't seen it in years, it still holds a great power over him. But yeah, and then the Council of Elrond is great. It gives all this backstory. It introduces Gimli and Legolas and Boromir. You know, and sort of not only gives a bunch of backstory to what happened to the ring, you know, with Isildur, Gil-galad, everything like that, but it also provides a state of what else is happening, you know, that's what happens when I talked about, like, there's been some mysterious deaths in the, you know, in the Lonely Mountain. That's where this comes up here. You know, Ringwraith approached one of the dwarves. That came up here. Gollum escaped. You know, the elves of Mirkwood. That's interesting. It's also curious. Something I was thinking about is, so, spoilers for the chapters I'm going to be talking about next. Gollum finds the party, and, you know, he wants the ring back. He wants his precious back. So, I'm curious where he finds them, like how he finds them. Because we know he finds him, Gollum finds them in Moria, and has been following them since Moria. But he might have been following them earlier. I mean, he's a clever, sly trickster that is very good at being sneaky, you know, when he's lived in a mountain by himself surrounded by orcs for so long. But anyway, I don't know, this chapter's great, but again, I sort of feel like, you know, this is also where you find out that Gandalf was held captive by Saruman, and everything I talked about when I talked about chapter 2 and whether Saruman knows, so you sort of find out that Saruman is evil at this point, and everything going on there. And Saruman is evil, but he has Ragadask under his thumb. You know, everything like that. So this just goes into a lot of backstory that I've already talked about in other segments, so I'm not going to harp on it again. Overall, this is a great chapter, and if you want to recap some of the history of Middle-earth and sort of everything that's going on at this time, I don't know how much the movie goes into it. I can't imagine. You know, the Council of Elrond is 30 pages long. It's a very long chapter with lots of details and sort of, you know, everything going on the state of Middle-earth, you know, what everything's up to. I can't imagine the movie goes fully in depth, so if you want to only see the movies, give this chapter a read. I think you'd enjoy it. And yeah, you know, I don't want to harp on things that I've already said on before. Although I will say Elrond, this is one thing I will say about it, is Elrond is an interesting character because he sort of feels reminiscent of, like, Gildor and some of the other elves, where he clearly has seen combat before. You know, he's sort of seen a lot that happens around him, and he has quite a knowledge of it. And he's sort of said to have, like, this gift of joy almost, right? Where, like, Rivendell is a happy place where things never go wrong, you know, kind of like Tom Bombadil. You know, no evil creeps in there. You can't possibly be sad while you're in Rivendell. You know, he's sort of like a Mary Sue, but, like, on purpose. I mean, not like on purpose, but like I mean, yes, on purpose, but, like, magically, you know? Like, in The Hobbit, he points out that there were, like, moon runes on there. He gives them all, like, you know, the right, proper, perfect food, you know, they need. So it's really interesting that this, again, this quite powerful, and something, obviously a recurring theme with this, with the elves, that this quite powerful person is just kind of, I guess, doesn't want to get involved, you know, just sitting on the sidelines. Probably, again, it all goes back to the ring. All goes back to the ring and that theme of power. He doesn't need the power, and he uses it to help he uses his power to help others when he can, but he's seeing what great power can do to people, how it can destroy things and corrupt them, so he chooses not to use it. So just goes back to that theme, and it's pretty interesting. Alright, Book 2, Chapter 3, The Ring Goes South. So this is their journey through, mostly, I don't remember the name, Caradas? The giant mountain. I'm trying to see if I can find it, but there's Caradras. I don't know if we're pronouncing that right, but, yeah, that's mostly what this chapter focuses on, and I don't know who, perpetuated it. so so the party goes up, tries to climb up. They have to go through the Misty Mountains basically, and they'd rather not go do what Bilbo did and go straight through the mountains, because they could go through Moria, which is this dwarf land that's been abandoned, where you shall not pass happens, because they are forced to go through there. But first they try to go through this mountain, and it's implied to the point of stating it that the mountain basically says, like, no. That the mountain is saying to them, you shall not pass. Like, as soon as they start trying to go through it, it becomes like 10 times colder. The snow picks up tremendously and becomes impossible to walk through. When they give up and leave, there are these boulders that come behind them and like block their path, as if saying, like, never come back here. It's interesting where it comes from. I don't think it's Saruman. I don't know. I sort of feel like it's some higher power, that's not Saruman. And it is possible that it could be Saruman. I mean, you have those birds flying overhead that they see shortly before they enter the mountain, and Ragadast is one with animals, so it's possible that Saruman got news of this journey. And honestly, I mean, it could be Saruman, but I don't know, something, especially because I think the birds is how Saruman hears of their journey in the second half of the book. Oh, well, this is getting into a little bit of spoilers for the first chapter of Two Towers, so I won't go into what happens, but let's just say some of Saruman's agents find the party in the first chapter of the Two Towers, and Aragorn says that he thinks it's the birds, flying overhead, that they keep seeing following them, for a lot of their journey, because of Ragadast, and because these birds didn't seem to really align with Sauron. Like, it just didn't really fit with Sauron. And so you have Ragadast, and, they seem to be following them, and so we sort of put two and two together and thought it was Saruman. Which I think makes sense, but I don't buy it for here. It's hard to really explain. But this didn't seem like, I don't know. Because I sort of feel like if it was Saruman, obviously, like, he would want the party to go to Isengard, right? But then, if this really was Saruman, why didn't he stop them from entering Moria? Because you could say, oh, them entering Moria is probably a death sentence. Yes, probably. Like, but would you really be, like, you wouldn't want to take that chance, would you? Right? Like, they clearly survived, so they had enough of their wits to survive and only lose one person in their party. Like, I don't know. And that's really the biggest thing against Saruman for me, is clearly he would know that Moria is right there, and that's something that they would try, right? And, like, why? And it also doesn't make sense, because if it is Saruman, and now it is Saruman, why doesn't he just send his troops after them? Gandalf says in the Council of Elrond that Saruman was building an army, and we see that army in action, in the first chapter of the Two Towers. And even though, yeah, that's been months, it has been a few months since, this Caradas and that attack, what you call it, like, Saruman had time, right? Like, Gandalf said when he was leaving, right? Like, that that, what you call it, that he was building an army, and he saw him building an army. Well, there's been months in between Gandalf, being freed, and Caradas. So Saruman had time to build an army. If Saruman knew where they were, he could have just sent the army after him. Or what he could have done is he could have used Caradas. He could have stalled, rather than pushing them back, he could have stalled them out on Caradas. Give them enough hope that, that they could push through. But slow them down enough that their journey slowed to a crawl, giving the, army plenty of time to catch them. But, so, like, that's what I mean. Or at the very least, slow them down and push them back, and then have the orcs meet them, have the army meet them at Moria. There's no indication that the orcs they meet in Moria are Saruman's. So, like, it just, I don't know. I don't think it makes sense that Caradas would be Saruman. Not everything else everything else doesn't line up for me. So, I don't know if we ever do get an answer of who it is. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, because I don't think it is the mountain itself. I sort of feel like it's a being living in the mountain, like the spirit of the mountain, or a being just controlling the mountain. So I don't know. I don't really know who it is. I don't know what other possibilities it could be, because again, I sort of feel like the same way if it was Sauron. Like, if it was Sauron, why not just sick the army on him, right? Like, like, if it's Sauron, then he knows where the ring is, and he can just put all the ring rates on him right there, and all his other servants on him right there. So it's just like, I don't know. But maybe we'll get an answer in the other two books. I don't really know, but that's my thoughts on it. Well, if you're wondering why it felt like these parts were recorded in segments, it's because they were. So when iMovie crashes and I lose footage, I don't lose a ton of footage, which just happened to me. So anyway, Book 2, Chapter 4, Journey in the Dark, and Book 2, Chapter 5, The Bridge of Khazad-dum. So this is when they're in Moria. So I'm just going to go over some of the stuff I said already, because I don't want to repeat myself for forever. But basically, I like what they did to expand on the Moria lore, I guess, in this one, right? So in The Hobbit, you sort of find out that dwarves live there, but they got run out by orcs, right? Thorin's grandfather died in Moria. Thorin, son of Thror. I don't know, Thor was either his father or his grandfather, I don't remember. But, and so here we get more lore about it. There's expanded lore, right? So the dwarves, were they lived there because mithril was such a valuable resource and it was abundant there, which is, mithril was a resource that's being described as like perfect, and sharp, for making weapons and everything, but also extremely light. So it's like the perfect thing to craft things that the dwarves wanted to craft things with. So it's perfect, but they dug too deep, out came the Balrog, and bad things occurred. The Balrog is the thing that Gandalf says, you shall not pass. I made that mistake in the deleted footage and here, for some reason. You shall not pass to, and you attacked them. And yeah, bad things happened. And I assume the Balrog teamed up with the orcs, like for the consistency of, with the Hobbit. But, yeah. Bad things happened. So I really like that consistency. I mean, adding on to the lore is really what it meant. And I talked about this already, but I love the description of Moria. It's so haunting and so chilling. You can really feel like how abandoned the place is, right? Like, because dwarves haven't lived there in years, and it's so claustrophobic. I mean, I would not want to go to Moria, even if you were throwing out the orcs attacking you, and that super creepy thing, in the lake, right outside the entrance, which I'd spent a couple minutes talking about just how creepy that thing is. And I'm going to do it again, because, man, I don't even know what that is. You don't even get a full description. Just that there's like tentacle things that come out and grab you and pull you into the lake. and you know there's something huge there, and it's incredibly and it also kills like all the dwarves. Well, it doesn't kill a lot of the dwarves, but it kills, I don't know, you know, right? So Balin was trapped, you know, when he died, and then him and his people died because on the side where that thing was, you know, the water rose up to the door. You know, there's water trickling in the door, and if you stepped out of the door, the thing would grab you, throw you into the lake, and kill you. It's disgusting. It's horrible. And I don't want to deal with it. Never want to deal with it. That's so creepy. You know, I've talked earlier about horror movie material. This is your horror movie material right here. Because, I don't know. I want no part of it. I think it's creepy. It's disgusting. It's terrifying. Especially because you don't even see it. But also like the hollowed emptiness of Moria. You know, like the way it's just so, I don't know, like you can feel like even though they're in a dark place and with no light the whole time, you can just feel how abandoned it is, that they have all these different cave structures and they wouldn't have them unless so many people live there, but you know, they all got killed off. It is in a way creepy, but it's also in a way sad and hollowed and empty. But I already talked about that with that one quote, so I'm not going to go into it too much here. But yeah, sucks the way Balin died, by the way. Balin and his people died because they were surrounded by that creepy ass thing in the lake on one side, and the orcs were standing on the other, so there was no escape. And they were just waiting to die, basically. Which is really, really shitty. But, what are you gonna do? But, yeah. Moria is not a place I want to go to. Never, never, never send me to Moria, please. Alright, then we get to chapter 6. Lothlorien. And chapter 7. The Mirror of Galadriel. I'm really not going to talk about this much more than I already have. At least the parts I did. I already talked about Lorien and Nenya. Hoping I inserted the air horn sound effects again. And I guess Farewell to Lorien also kind of counts in that, you know, chapter 8. Farewell to Lorien, just because I already talked about this a lot. But I would say one thing I did talk about was, what I will talk about was, this was when I was fully clued in. You know, I talked about all these little details that make this book great, and this was sort of one of them with Gollum chasing him, because you know there were so many little things that sort of added up, and they really started adding up here when Gollum tries to climb that, you know, the plank of, you know, the tree that these, you know, Frodo is resting on, you know, and you sort of see these beady eyes coming at you. That's when I knew it was Gollum, for two reasons. One, you know, I already talked about this with, you know, when I talked about how inaccurate the set is for Gollum's thing in The Hobbit, but you know, the big beady eyes were like basically shown to be like the only thing Bilbo has for light, and a sword in the cave. So you know, the fact that they made a detail of such similar eyes, it's like, oh. And then the fact that one of the elves who comes to check on him says, yeah, there was that thing coming and it ran away. I almost thought it was one of you guys, which is why I didn't shoot it, which added more to the suspicion, because we already know that Gollum used to be a hobbit. You know, Gollum was originally a hobbit before it became whatever it is now, Gollum, I guess. And again, so it's just small details like that really added up. And it was at that point, I was like, oh, that's Gollum. I'm pretty convinced that's Gollum. And of course, I was right. Also, the Mirror of Galadriel. This was an interesting one because this book has used visions multiple times to sort of get across its point, right? Like in Tom Bombadil, Frodo saw a vision of Gandalf being captive, you know, and we find out later that it was Gandalf in Isengard, you know, being captured by Sauron. And then here we get more visions. Frodo gets more visions. You know, Sam gets a vision of the Shire going to shit. And Frodo gets a vision of, you know, Saruman. Some other stuff. I'm trying to find it. Yeah, so Bilbo walking restlessly in his room. That makes sense. Something about the sea. Something about the sea. Something's going on there with the Holy Land. Because that, you know, definitely seems to be what the elves are talking about when they talk about going west. You know, yeah, Sauron, and the, this is actually the first time we see Sauron's eye, is Sauron's eye looking at him, which is pretty creepy. And it's also funny because I kind of skimmed over that, you know, when they were describing Sauron's eye, I really skimmed over that description. Because it's Sauron's eye. You didn't need to tell me that was Sauron's eye. I know what Sauron's eye looked like. It's so famous. So it's an interesting way of using, you know, book does an interesting way of using visions as sort of foreshadowing and setting everything up. Sort of reminds me of Xenoblade 1, and, you know, and how they use that story similarly. So it'll be interesting to see how these visions play out. And that's sort of everything I have to say. For leaving Lorien sad, I already talked about everything, the dilemma with Galadriel and everything, so yeah, I don't think there's much else to say here. Alright. Chapter 9. The Great River. So, this is when they're in Anduin, and they're going down to Anduin, and they see orcs on one side of the river trying to attack them, which is bad. I don't know. It doesn't feel like a lot happened here aside from sort of revealing that Gollum was the one following them. I'm trying to see if I'm just missing stuff. But it's really, the whole point of this chapter is just that they're getting close, right? It's up, they're getting close. They're going to have to make a decision about where to go soon. You know, the journey is wrapping up. And it's, you know, sort of, this is sort of like the rising action, I think, is what it is from English. You know, that thing right before the climax of the book. That's really what this chapter is. And, you know, it does its job of bringing up that tension well and sort of, you know, trying to remind the characters you're going to have to split up soon or make a decision. And it does that pretty well. And I don't really think there's much else to talk about with this chapter unless I'm missing something. So, on to the last one. Alright, here it is, the last chapter. Book 2, Chapter 10. The Breaking of the Fellowship. This was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do chapter breakdowns, you know, thinking about it in my head and sort of feeling like I missed stuff, was because I didn't feel like I talked about this ending in full. You know, I talked about parts of it. I talked about Boromir getting corrupted by the ring. I talked about how I don't like cliffhangers. And I guess I talked about Frodo leaving too, but I don't feel like I ever really put it all together. You know, they were all talked about on separate occasions. So, what did I think about this ending? First off, this ending's great. It's just really good. I mean, Boromir getting corrupted by the ring, it's like in character, right? Like, it's sad, but it makes perfect sense. And I'm glad that he at least regretted his actions. He sort of said, you know, I don't know what came hold of me, you know, when Frodo runs away. And again, I talked about this ending pretty extensively because I talked about that vision the ring gave him too with Tom Bombadil. So I talked about this ending segment in parts lots already, but the one thing I will talk about is Sam. Sam figuring it out. Sam not letting Frodo go away by himself. It just warms my heart. You know, that Sam is everything just Frodo needs, you know. Um, he can't do it alone. You know, he doesn't want to bring others to his death, but he also can't do it alone. So Sam figures out his plan and says, I'm not letting you go alone. We're doing this together, or we're doing this not at all. And so it's so sweet, it's so wholesome that Frodo just, he has someone like that who's willing to risk life and limb to bear the same burden as him. So I don't know. I really, really like that part. And man, Frodo, I get it. I will say that because it's true. I do get it. You know why he did this? Because he doesn't want to endanger anybody. And he sort of feels like it's so sad. He sort of feels like, you know, it's like Harry Potter book 7, where Harry sacrifices himself. Now, obviously, Harry doesn't know that. I actually know Harry does know. Let me put it this way. Harry doesn't know that he'll survive. He knows at that point that he has to do it, so Voldemort can be killed by someone else. But you know, he doesn't know he's going to survive at that point. But he's willing to give everyone else up. So people, you know, one, so people can kill Voldemort, right? You know, because with Harry dead, the last Horcrux would be dead, and someone can finally kill Voldemort and save everyone. And 2, because Voldemort said he was going to invade, you know, because Voldemort basically said the invasion of Hogwarts, the Battle of Hogwarts would stop if Harry was given up, right? He said he wouldn't invade Hogwarts unless Harry was given up. You know, if Harry was given up. So he does it to save everyone. He does it to save everyone else because he would rather die himself than let all the other people he cared about die. And that's what Frodo does here, right? I mean, it's a little different, but Frodo leaves everyone else behind because he cares about them too much. And because, you know, like I talked about when I talked about his character, Frodo knows he's walking into Death's arms, right? He knows that he's not going to make this out alive. At least he doesn't think he's going to make it out alive. He feels like he's walking right to death. And he feels like the best thing he can do for the people he cares about is to prevent them from also dying. And so it's really sweet. It's so brave that Frodo is... He's definitely a Gryffindor. Now Frodo is willing to stand to it. You know, stand to it all heads on. So it's great. I really like this. I like this ending a lot. And it sets up for interesting things to come. So with that, I think I'm going to call it quits. So first off, I'm going to do a recap. So because I did this after I basically finished editing everything else, I'll give you a quick recap on where I put all the main parties' Hogwarts houses. So I said Frodo was a Gryffindor. What else did I say? Gandalf. I don't feel like we know enough about Gandalf to properly place him. But based off of what we do know, I said Slytherin. Aragorn is definitely Ravenclaw. Legolas, I said, is a Hufflepuff Ravenclaw mix because Legolas is a really good friend. And there's a last line. I mean, I don't want to like spoil it. I don't want to go into what I read that much within the Two Towers. But there was this line, you know, that I read after sorting Legolas into Hufflepuff that made me definitely think, oh, he's definitely a Hufflepuff. Where, you know, so someone's in jeopardy and you know, Legolas is talking about how they have to go help, right? You know, you don't want to leave him alone. You know, and so, you know, you can interpret that what you want with the way this book ended, but someone's in jeopardy and Legolas wants to go help out someone. And he basically said that Like, I can't stand the thought of friend being, in trouble, in peril, in misery. So let's go help him. And once I read that, I was like, oh, it's definitely a Hufflepuff. But I think he's also part Ravenclaw, because I do think he does think logically too. Like he's not stupid. He cares a lot about his friends, but he also thinks logically on what the best way forward is. And when you're an elf and you have a lot of experience like that, I think that makes sense. Gimli is the exact opposite in my mind. He's definitely a Gryffindor and a Slytherin. In the same position, when you're looking to help out someone, Gimli's like, well, I'll just go and beat up all the bad guys. Like, we're not gonna let our friends suffer. I'm just gonna charge right in there. Kill all the bad guys that I need to kill to save whoever it is, and it's all good, and it's not a problem. But I also put him as a Slytherin because he does still seem to succumb to the dwarf ways of, liking a good battle story, of glory, right? Dwarves are a lot about glory and ambition, and Gimli had some ambition about what the dwarves did, and some pride about what the old dwarves were able to accomplish in Moria, with the mithril, and he likes a good battle story, and he likes a good weapon too, so that's why I think he is a Gryffindor-Slytherin mix. Did I miss anyone? Oh, I didn't do Merry and Pippin. Also, I'm just now realizing. Merry and Pippin, I guess they have to be Gryffindor. They can't be anything but Gryffindor. Just sort of for the same reason as Sam. Did I do Sam? Sam I actually think is a Hufflepuff. Actually, Okay, so now that I'm saying that, I think they are both Gryffindor, and they're Gryffindor Hufflepuff. I think the three of them are. For almost exactly the same reason. They're willing to walk headfirst in danger because they don't want Frodo to do it alone. And they have absolutely no qualms with walking into danger because they don't want Frodo to do it alone. I think I would put Sam more into Hufflepuff. I think if I were to rank them more, I think Sam I would lean more toward Hufflepuff with some Gryffindor, and I think I would put Merry and Pippin in more Gryffindor than Hufflepuff, but they are definitely a Gryffindor Hufflepuff mix. Trying to think. Did I miss anyone? I don't think so. If I miss someone, I'll put it in editing, but I think that's everyone. As for myself, I don't know. So I took like the most updated quiz. It's not like on Pottermore or whatever the new website was, and I got Gryffindor, which is actually pretty surprising. But myself personally, I consider myself to be a Ravenclaw with some Slytherin. Not the racist part. I feel like I have to say that every time I say I think I'm part Slytherin, but just because ambition. And, I think it could be, my thoughts can be quite ambitious. Let's just say that. But with that Hogwarts house sorting out of the way that you probably didn't ask for, but I did anyway, I'm going to end the video now. Finally, I am done talking about this book. I know it took way too long. I am so sorry. I really did not expect this to be this long. Like, I'm not kidding. I expected this video to be, at the very least, be less than 2 hours. This will absolutely not be less than 2 hours. But if you want to see more, I got good news for you. There are 2 other books. I don't know if I'm gonna do, like 2.5 hour, 3 hour rants about the 2 of them, but I can tell you I will definitely do rants. I will probably go for longer than an hour also, so if you want to check them out, stay in tune to what I'm uploading, click the sub button and the like button. Look at this graph. And yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Peace.